Hypocrisy.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And with me today is a very, very special guest. This is attorney Phil Ellison. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Nice.
I'm here. I would say in the flesh, but not actually.
Right, in the virtual flesh.
Virtual flesh. That's right.
Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm happy to talk to you. I've been so for the purposes of the chat, Phil is one of the attorneys for Lucas Gerhard. Lucas is a young man who has been on government lockdown for the better part of 18 months, something like that, I believe.
Pretty close. Yeah, pretty close.
And for the entire horrific crime of posting a picture of a legally purchased and owned firearm, making a statement about that firearm, and then following college policies of checking that firearm into an armory. That is the crime he is charged with, and it has been a case, and with lots of twists and turns, and but now he is represented by Phil here. We watched his appellate arguments the other day. And I think that's kind of how this connection happened. Is that right?
Well, I took the abuse on the first half and the compliments in the last half, right? So, and of course, the other half of free speech is it's not all compliments, right? You got to take criticism with it. But yeah, no, I did watch it, and I did read a lot of the comments that people wrote as well. And oh yeah. And hey, you know what? I'll defend their right to the end to say what they want. Second chin and all on the thing as well, which I got. But it's important. One of the things that most people don't realize is that it's important not just to talk about free speech, but to actually practice free speech, right?
Yes.
I mean, the problem is that you only have those rights that you can exercise, and if you don't exercise them, they aren't protected, right? They aren't recognized. And folks that are and I'm just going to use the government as kind of the general topic, the general phrase to describe this. If you're not exercising, they're not used to them, and of course, they always think you're weird for exercising those rights in a particular way.
It's that's kind of the amazing thing is this idea that people who want that freedom are somehow they're like the minority. They're the weird person. They're the odd man out. It's like, well, why would you want to say something that's offensive? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I have to. Maybe I have to get offensive at some point. Maybe I just want to tell a joke. Maybe I'm telling a story that involves offensive material. Maybe I'm speaking out against the government who is suppressing offensive material. You never know. But I agree. Yeah, the idea that we have to go ahead and practice that free speech. And I think you're hinting at something that I've long held, that we should also subject ourselves to the speech that comes our way. Right?
I agree. Yep, I agree. It's you got to take the bitter with the sweet on this. And one of the things that is important is just because I disagree with, in this case, you were talking about the assessment of my work at the Court of Appeals, or whether I assess the speech that governors and sheriffs and prosecutors make, and I can criticize that. And I'll tell you, as much as I am, somewhat negative Nancy on a lot of things that are occurring out there right now, one thing I'm really glad is I'm not afraid that the government is going to send its black helicopters to drag me out of my house in each night. So, so as much as I complain, it keeps the barbarian at the gate too on this, is because I don't have to worry about someone I've pissed off enough because again, I don't, to your listeners and viewers out there, I mean, I've sued governors, I've sued sheriffs, I've sued prosecutors. I've never had to worry about being dragged out with men in masks in the middle of the night and being hauled off to to a black site somewhere and not find. My wife gets to collect on all that life insurance policy that
Yes.
we've been paying for all these years, right? But that's great, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, that's great. I mean, so as much as there's the negative, it's also really positive, because in a lot of countries we don't have. I mean, you have that legitimate fear if you're the guy speaking out or you're the gal speaking out on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always been one thing, and I think one thing that has been the major saving grace of the Roberts Court. Whatever you may think of the Roberts Supreme Court, one thing they have protected heavily is our right to speak individually and to be critical of the government. I mean, that has been consistent through Roberts' administration, from G.W. Bush all the way through current day under Biden. And so that's the whatever else I'll ever say about Justice John Roberts. There's the nice thing.
Well, not to worry. It's coming up on the June-July dump pretty soon here, so you might have a different opinion real quick, so.
This is true. We've got lots of cases brewing that are pretty interesting. And of course, next session is shaping up to be a very controversial session of the Supreme Court. So that'll be one to watch as well. But I want you to know something. I said it on the video that you're watching, but I want to say it again. All of my criticisms, and I try to make this clear to people, are made from the comfort of not being the guy sitting in front of the court. And so it's like, this is easy for me. I get to say what in this wonderful hypothetical world I would say and do without any pressure or challenge to that. And so,
well, that's the fun part of being the Monday morning quarterback,
exactly.
Right? You get to do that kind of stuff. And guess what? I love you for it. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And that's why, hey, I'm here at midnight in the Eastern District, or in the Eastern time zone.
Yeah.
Here to come talk to you and these guys, not because I respect the fact that, hey, you're someone other than my wife can tell me I'm wrong, right? So, and because believe me, whatever criticism anybody can throw, it pales in comparison to what my wife can throw at my way when she's really want to tell me what she thinks, right?
Right.
So,
right. When you've done whatever it is that you have done.
I was going to say, I might be shooting myself. I know some of your listeners are from my neck of the woods and know who me and who my wife is, so I might be shooting myself in the foot here. So, but.
Well, that's the safe place to shoot yourself.
That's right.
It's not on camera, so we won't get hit for gore or violence with that one. So I wanted to take a moment, if you could, and could we do kind of a helicopter view of the Lucas case? Kind of just run through some of the major issues in the case, and then I think we can use that to transition away from talking about his case specifically, but talk more generally about these ideas of free speech and what I'm calling essential liberty. And, these are the freedoms that we've been talking about. And I'd like to then maybe even move into talking about different governors, different states, and how that's shaping up this year. Because we seem to have some governors that I've been following making some moves for maybe president, but also just in setting the barometer for either conservative or liberal states. DeSantis comes to mind as one of the big ones on the conservative side. And so if we could kind of move through that rough game plan, if we get off on tangents, that's great.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Lucas Gerhard, interesting story. I went to Lake Superior State University. I graduated from Lake Superior State University. I was, as your listeners heard about it, the oral argument, and I'm sure when talking to you about it, is that there's Lauren Bond, who was in that case, who's the main witness, who was the one that was so offended by the sight of the firearm.
Right.
She was an RA, which is a resident assistant, kind of like a house mom, house dad, whatever, if you will, for the older students that are there for the younger ones. I was that RA. I was in Lauren Bonds' position at Lake Superior State. I was there. It was not unusual for people to have not even just one, but a slew of handguns, a slew of firearms, a slew of, I think one guy had like ninja stars that he kept down at the armory. And that's what we always called it, was the armory, right? So,
right.
And so mind you, now I'm dating myself now, and I went there 20 years ago, and it wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a thing.
This is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
So you literally take I-75 to
right,
the last exit before the Canadian crossing guards,
right.
right there, literally right there.
Yeah, and so this is in a pretty rural area, if I'm not
Very much,
mistaken.
very
And
much.
the one of the reasons people have guns up there is because hunting is a thing, right?
Oh,
Is that
huge,
true? Yeah,
huge. Hunting, skeet shooting, trapping. I mean, anything you could. So I don't do those things at all, just because I'm more of the guy that goes to Holiday Inn for my trip.
sure.
But a lot of the draw for the students up there that were up there was because they'd go to class in the morning or in the early afternoon, and they could be out hunting or fishing or trapping or snowshoeing or skiing. I mean, right across the border. Before, when we used to be able to cross borders a lot easier than we could now, but back then, I mean, you would hop there and you'd be to Searchmont in 40 minutes, and you'd go skiing up there all the time as well. So, I mean, this was a huge outdoor recreational draw for these students to be there. And I think honestly, the concern is that if the campus security, now mind you, we didn't have a police, it's not a police department up there. It's actually campus security. It's a private, like, guards, I guess would be about the best way to describe it up there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think the concern has always been is that if they didn't store the guns in the armory, right, that or these weapons in the armory, they were just going to end up under the beds in the dorm rooms.
Right.
So you might as well try to be a little more proactive about it. Let them check them in, and I'll tell you, I went there 4 years, never once never once had a concern, never once. So I don't know, I don't like to pick on witnesses too badly, but I'm going to pick on this particular witness because I don't know if she's never been to Lake State, like, because apparently she was an RA there, but apparently she didn't really live there. I guess I don't know, because this was normal all the time up there, and the concern that, of course, I can to pivot here with to Lucas's case is that he sent a snap to a group of friends,
Right.
and he was real excited about this particular new firearm purchase. And what happened is this Lauren Bond, who was not, and it was a really important point that in your discussion last time, is she was not the intended recipient of that message. And
Right.
what happens, of course, in the area of First Amendment, why that's so important is because things we say in jest or things we make jokes on can be misinterpreted and misconstrued all the time. And
Absolutely.
the example I could use and I don't know, I know you're a married man and I'm a married man, and I don't know how many of your listeners out there are married men, or married women, but there are times you could sit there and say, I could just kill my wife, or I could just kill my husband. You don't mean it literally.
Right. Right.
You mean it figuratively, right?
Yeah.
Not, and even then, sometimes you might cross the line to live literally. We hear about those stories, and you end up as a special on Dateline or something, right? But for the most part, we don't. It's an expression to vent frustration and anger. Well, are we going to lock up everybody who starts saying, I could just kill my wife, or I could just kill my husband, and when speaking between friends to vent rage or to vent frustration? It's insanity.
Yeah, that's one of the issues here, and that's the true threat assessment. Is this statement made and actually intended to be a threat? Threats are crimes of intent, and you have to intend the threat to create apprehension in the person being threatened, typically speaking. And that's one of the key tests that the court is supposed to have to find out as a matter of fact. And that's one of the things the prosecution will have to prove. And in this case, again, not to get too deep into it, but that's
Right.
one of my biggest questions for the prosecutor is, who is the target of the threat? Because the crime of threatening someone, which you're actually punishing for, and I liked what you were saying at the appeals court, is trying to drive these judges towards what the punishment is on. And I thought the solicitation argument from the one judge was just way out there. It's like, no, the act of the solicitation is the crime here. Whereas with the threat, you're punishing the speech because the speech is the weapon in a threat. The speech is causing apprehension, emotional distress, psychological damage, those sorts of things in a person. And so with this case, I just can't find who the target of the threat is, and I can't find where the intent to deliver that damage is. And that's why I find this case so fascinating, is because it looks to me like it's almost entirely being drawn out of the idea that, well, there were some mass shootings in the news around the time that this statement was made. Therefore, we must take it beyond what it was and prosecute it. I mean, that's just what it kind of looks like.
Well, and the problem is, and I'm just going to jump in, and this was what I was trying to get across to the judges, is, perception and biases. And when I say biases, I don't mean terrible, like dark biases. We as humans process information through the lens of our experiences, right? And through the lens of our opinions sometimes. And what happens is, and I'm speaking to judges as a whole, not just these particular three judges, but the problem here is that a lot of times things we are uncomfortable with that we see, even if we're wearing a robe, must be unconstitutional or must be protected from, right?
Right.
And that was the point. For example, in this particular case, I was trying to argue about whether you like guns or don't like guns. Clearly, there are people that don't like guns. They don't even like the sight of a gun, right?
Right.
And so what happens is they perceive that any picture with a gun is a threat, regardless of what the message actually is. And it may, because it's the way our brains as humans, we short circuit things, we make weird connections to things. But we got to be more mindful about that if we're going to be protecting the First Amendment this way, because otherwise what happens is we start making decisions based on what the subjective viewpoints of the judge is, rather than whether or not it's an actual threat. And of course, the hard part when you're a lawyer is when you walk into a panel, and for my disclaimer, I'm not talking about this specific panel.
Right.
But any panel is that some judges' viewpoints before you walk in to that panel. And no amount of great oratory is going to change their mind on anything. And I know you've talked about, and I can't speak to these three judges right now because, of course, they've got a case right now. But I've been before many, many panels of the Michigan Supreme Court, Michigan Court of Appeals, Sixth Circuit. And you just know, based on judges' prior decisions and prior statements, some of them you're just not going to win over.
Oh, I've had criminal defense cases where you walk in and the judge is immediately using language like, well, you did this, or not you're accused of doing this, like, well, you did this and you need to shape up your attitude. And I've got, and you're like, well, Your Honor, I mean, this is still a first appearance. We're setting bond here, and you've convicted this guy. And when that happens, you kind of bite your tongue, bite your cheek, and you make the best argument you can. You hope for the best, but it's sometimes you're going to know especially on an appellate panel, like you said, you can typically do some pretty extensive research on what these judges' decisions have been in similar cases. But even in just district trial court practice, you walk in and you can get clues pretty quickly on where a judge is sitting. And that's when you're just like, this is going to be a painful hearing.
Well, you just grab on and you hope to survive through the end of it. Right. I mean, and that's
right.
It's, people think that it's kind of like the whole idea about acting, right? Lawyering is a lot like acting. And I say that meaning not to trivialize it, but if an actor is doing their job really, really well, it looks really, really easy.
Yep.
And I'll tell anybody that's listening right now in this is like, if you want a comparison, watch the actors you see in the big time actors you see on movies and go compare that to your brother and sister's 6th grade play that you went and you had to go watch, right? Or a family member. It's painful to sit there when 6th graders are up there trying to play out a play, right? It's just painful. It's hard. It's just, you want to run out of the room. I mean, you try to be supportive, obviously, but it's painful. So one of the things about being a good lawyer is that the easier it looks, the tougher it actually is. And that's one of the hard parts and of course, what do you do when you get a judge that doesn't agree with you, right?
Yeah.
You try to jam it down their throat. Well, that doesn't work.
Nope.
So, sometimes what you do is you do it on particular cases. You say to yourself, you're not going to win that judge. If you got a 3-judge panel, you say to yourself, and you think you got a judge who's going to rule for you. A lot of times you're only talking to one judge, whether it's 3 judges or 5 judges or 7 judges or 9 judges. Sometimes you're only speaking to one. You're trying to convince that one judge because they're the swing vote on that particular panel that way.
Yeah, and that whole dance is always interesting. Coming at it from the outside, that's what I find really neat about watching some of these arguments, and is that you get to watch them without all of that context, and you get to just kind of see what's going on. But it's interesting. I wanted to go back to a point you made about judges and their biases or presuppositions being used to inform their decision making on what needs to be protected or whatnot. It's crazy because it's like, what we need those judges to do is to say, if this thing makes you apprehensive, you need to be extra cautious on this one. Not more brazen in trying to get rid of it. You need to go against those inherent feelings, because that's the speech that's worth protecting. It's not really, no one's protecting anybody saying good morning, because that's not an offensive thing. You walk up, you say good morning, and everybody, it's a nice little greeting. If we protected the right to say good morning, everybody would go, was that in question? But it's the offensive word, the insult, the potential threat, the picture that you don't like, the thing that goes against your religious beliefs. Those are the things where you have to go, I have to check myself on this and make sure it's not me that wants this banned, but the law that wants this banned. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to jump in. I don't mean to interrupt you there, but there's a case that is directly goes to what you're talking about. And it's one of my favorite First Amendment cases. It's little known. It's called United States versus Stevens.
Okay.
And United States versus Stevens is a case about Congress passed a law that made it a crime to own. I'm going to probably age myself here, but crime to own dog fighting snuff videos is what they call it. Okay. So for those who are younger here in your group, a snuff video was the term you would use to describe usually when there was a bachelor party and some guy had an old reel of some pornography would be playing, or, some pictures of girls with tops off. I'm talking, this is like the 30s and 40s, right? This is what we call snuff photos, right? Or snuff videos.
This is before those landmark decisions in the 60s that protected these types of videos.
That's right. And so what happened is that Congress passed a law that said possession, transportation, transmitting, et cetera, of dogfighting videos is a federal crime. Every single state in our country, in fact, probably even the Panama Canal, if you go look at their rules down there, has got a law against dogfighting.
Right.
Dogfighting is a crime everywhere, right? Now, maybe based on where you're at in the country, it might be a little stiffer than other spots, but it's unlawful in every single state. And so Congress took the next step and said possession of content and the communication of that content about dogfighting is a crime. Went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, and I'm just paraphrasing, obviously, but dogfighting, not good, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't support that. We don't like it. And when I'm talking about dogfighting, guys, I'm talking like 2 dogs in a ring, and one's going to kill the other one they're betting money on this, right? I mean, this is pretty gruesome, morbid stuff, right?
Right. They fight to the death in these things usually.
Fight to the death. Nasty, nasty dogs that fight. I mean, these dogs are bred to be tough, nasty dogs with, to go and fight like this, right? The U.S. Supreme Court said it is unlawful for Congress to pass a law prohibiting essentially speech about these dog videos like this. And while they don't support the act, and while the act itself is even criminal, you can't criminalize the communicative aspect about that activity itself. And they struck down that law going forward. Now that's important. I mean, I think that case is a great example of what you're talking about, because I'm not going to speak for the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, but I'm going to guess Ruth Bader Ginsburg was not the biggest fan of going to dog fights in the evening, right? So
I think that may be her closet thing. That
okay, well, hey, stranger things have happened, right? But
sure.
I think we can all, at least most people would agree that dog fighting is probably not something we as a society want to prop up as being part of our better angels, right? And so, but the United States Supreme Court still said the speech about dog fighting, including videos of it, is protected communicative content and is protected by the First Amendment, and Congress can't pass a law because, again, it doesn't fit within one of the exceptions that takes it outside the protections of the First Amendment, even if we hate the content that's there. And I think that's a really powerful case to remind people is that you can hate the message, but you can't criminalize the message going forward, except in the most rare of circumstances. And they're very narrow, and they should be kept very narrow.
Yeah, that's why Carrot Top is still allowed to sell DVDs, for example.
He's still around?
I don't know. God, I hope not. Why won't he get some true threats?
Well, now you're going to get hate mail from some orange-haired listeners now for sure, right? So, but
I can take them. They don't have souls anyway. Okay, I've got a chat from Tina, and this will be interesting. I don't know if you've seen this. It says, I think you two need to take some tips from Ronnie Oneil if you really want to be good lawyers. Are you familiar with this Florida case, Ronnie Oneil? It's a double murder, and the guy's representing himself. His trial started yesterday.
I'm not. I can't say that I am.
Okay, well, they have his opening statement is now released to the public on YouTube, and he looks like he's about 5 seconds from murdering the jury. He's screaming his opening statements at them, saying that the government basically has tampered with evidence and framed him in this double murder, and it's a thing of magic. I strongly recommend giving it a look.
So literally, you will know what I'm going to be doing in about a half hour's time as soon as I get done talking to you. My phone's on the charger right now as we speak, so
I'll text you the name just so you have
it.
But yeah, it's a fascinating sort of subject because the best part is, for me, the first half, the guy sounds crazy. The second half, his story starts to come together, and I'm like, man, you just needed to organize this opening statement a little better, and that'll be that would have been better. But I think he's getting the death penalty at this point. So we'll see.
So I'll say two things that I've been watching some of your shows before I came on. To be perfectly honest, didn't know much about you until I heard you were, critiquing me. Right.
Yeah. Wouldn't expect you to.
Yeah. So I the two things that I will tell people, one is tied to what you're talking about right now, folks. If you're getting charged with a serious crime, do not do a Ronnie, right? do not. And when I say that, I don't mean yelling at the jury. I mean, get yourself a lawyer, right? Because you get one shot, right? And if you screw that up and you don't get a do-over, you'll be talking about how badly you could have or should have or would have done your trial had you done it a different way the second time. And the second one, of course, you keep saying is don't talk to the cops. And I cannot agree with you more on that is don't talk to cops, right? I'm from a small town.
Yep.
Okay. The chief of police, not the current one, the previous one, right? used to deliver eggs to my house because he had chickens. All right. This is how small town we're talking about, folks, right? I was joking before the show, more cows than people back when I was a boy, right? I moved back to my hometown after I went to law school and my master's degree. And I would, even though I'd talk to him when he'd come in to deliver the eggs, but sure to God, if he pulled me over or he wanted to talk to me about anything else other than delivering those eggs, I ain't saying a damn thing to him. No matter, nope. And I get it. I may cut off my egg supply, right? Doesn't matter. You don't talk to cops with stuff because that was where you screw up. Because no matter how well you think you can keep your story together, even if you're telling the truth, you're going to slip up in some way, or you omit something you didn't mean to omit, and next thing you know, you're being what's the word they usually use? You're being you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid even answering the question. You're being evasive.
Right. Yeah, you're being evasive. There you go.
You know, and it's like, yeah, don't even do that. So take those pieces of advice, and then we can talk about all this other theory stuff we're gonna rail about here for the next half hour or so. But don't take those two to the banks. Take those two to the bank that way.
Yeah, and a great case on that is the case of Michael Drezhka. He's the guy who was yelling at someone for parking in a handicapped parking spot. Was a woman in the car, and then her boyfriend came out, saw him, knocked him to the ground, and then he pulls the gun and shoots the boyfriend. Argued justified killing, but in his police interviews, he said he was never scared because he was armed. And it's like, well, you just killed your self-defense case. If you have to be both objectively, reasonably in fear and subjectively in fear. Yep. And he killed his self-defense case, and that guy I think he got 40 years or life or something. You know, he's going away for murder forever, and it's largely based on that conversation that he had without counsel, because he was one of those tactical guys. You know, he's telling the cops about his gun and about all the training that he's had and all these things, and it's like and the cops are just like, oh yeah, you know, buddy, very chummy with him. Everything was very friendly. And then, you know, they're sitting there under the table tying the noose. And it's like, you can't do that. So, okay. So Lucas's case is kind of this flashpoint for me of the ideas of the extent of speech and how they intersect with the internet. Our ability to communicate has changed dramatically over the past 10, 15 years. And we communicate not just in more ways, but completely different ways than we've ever done before. Twitter is this weird thing where you can just blurt out little bits of information to, you know, in an infinite number of people at all times. And so that's changed.
God, they gave two screwballs like us a platform now here tonight to talk, right?
Exactly. Right. We used to be to get a lawyer, you had to be, or to get a lawyer on TV, you had to have a TV network supporting that and doing, you know, whatever vetting they wanted to do about it, and having a whole bunch of messy contracts. Now you just give a moron like me an ability to press a button and then a phone, and I call someone and they get on the show with me. You know, so it's great. But so I kind of want to talk about that, I guess, in the nature of what a true threat is. What is where do we draw the line on protecting speech? Maybe that's the good question. What kind of statements should not be protected? And there's one going around right now that I think is an interesting question. It's Courtney Love, widow of Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. And it almost looks like album art, and it's got her words. It says, "I want lying journalist's head," or something like that. So I guess, is that the type of true threat that should be prosecuted, or is that the type of speech that should be permitted and protected? And I guess we could take that another step farther. We've got Kathy Griffin, when she famously had the picture of her with the severed head of a fake Donald Trump. So I guess, what are your kind of thoughts on the limits of these things? How do we need to look at them? or how do we
Well,
look at them even?
well, and that's the, and I'm going to go back to the, and I hate to keep going back to the one I watched with the Court of Appeals arguments, but I think there's a good spot in there where we talk about, as lawyers, we try to divide up a structure, like a framework for which we try to analyze what's on the right side of what's lawful, what's not lawful in these circumstances. And so one of the first kind of, you start down the path and you say, is this acts or is this speech, right? And if it's
Yes.
acts, you got the government has traditionally always had a lot of flexibility and a lot of discretion to develop laws and rules and codes of conduct and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you get on the speech side, that's a whole nother branch that basically is supposed to be only those things that are fit within the exceptions that the United States Supreme Court has found to be not protected speech.
Right.
So what you've got is, if you think about it right off the bat, now the problem with that is that if it would be real nice and easy if we just said, oh, all speech is protected, all actions not protected, real simple, real easy, right? Except it's not that easy. So let me
No.
give an example, and I know you know these examples, but let's throw this out there, is flag burning, right?
Right.
Okay. Flag burning is not actually speech in the purest sense. It's action, right?
Right.
But it's action designed to express a point or communicate a thought or communicate an objection, if you will. So action can sometimes be what we call this word, you've heard this phrase, is expressive conduct, right? So now we've got a branch, a little sliver coming off of the action side that say, well, and by the way, folks, flag burning is a protected activity under U.S. Supreme Court precedent.
Now, isn't defacing currency similarly protected if it's done as an expressive act?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know that one offhand. I know there's crimes against defacing currency, but at the same time, I always get the dollar bills that's got the Weird George thing stamped on them, where you plug the number in, and you find out that it was spent at the grocery store or the convenience store down the road from you or whatever, and you're bummed because it only went like 3 miles, not 3,000 miles, right?
Sure.
But the point is, so now you've got expressive conduct, action that's got a protective pointer coming out of it. And then over on the other side, you've got speech, and you say, oh, well, surely all speech is protected. Well, it's not, right? The Supreme Court has come up with kind of this list of about a dozen different things that they've held that the government can enact rules. And by enacting rules, that means they can enact punishment for violating those rules. And of course, the one that we're talking about with Lucas is quite a bit is this idea of true threats, right?
Right.
Now,
some of the other ones would be obscenity, which is
correct?
a really muddy definition, but it's one of them. Another one is fighting words, which
Fighting
is
word. Yep.
an almost impossible standard to write a law around. So the reason I bring it up is someone in the chat asked me, are fighting words a real thing? It's like, well, theoretically fighting words are a real thing, but trying to craft a law around fighting words is almost impossible. And so they run into issues with either vagueness or overbreadth on fighting word restrictions. But those are theoretically non-protected. And then there's I think those are the big three categories.
Well, you got a couple others. You got your troop, what I always call the troopship exception, right? Like they can punish you for talking about the location of where military forces are located. That was one that was created in the 40s because, of course, that case came up during the war, right? And that became an exception. And of course, then it's like, well, how far does that go? I want to read, if you'll indulge me here, I'm going to read you a law that came into effect by a national leader who enacted this during a time when his country was falling apart. And he issued an executive order that said that during this existing insurrection, as is necessary means for suppressing the same, all rebels and insurgents, their aiders and abettors within the country, and all persons discouraging enlistments, resisting militia drafts, or practicing disloyalty. Which, oh my God, of course, First Amendment lawyers, us, we're already freaking out. Just hearing that, we're freaking out, right? Already right off the bat.
Yeah.
Affording aid and comfort to the rebels against the authority of the country shall be subject to court martial, liable at trial, and punished by the courts, by a courts martial or a military commission. Right?
Yeah.
So we're thinking, oh my God, what third world dictator issued this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Right. So that's the famous case. If you go to law school and you start studying your constitutional law, that's your ex parte Milligan case, right? And of course, here is Abraham Lincoln, who history has revered as the great civil rights leader, is literally throwing dissenters and people who would speak out against what the union is doing. Now, when I'm talking about, speaking out against the union, it's not just saying, oh, I think we should succeed. It's maybe we shouldn't kill everybody, right?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, you're not helping the war effort. You're going to a military prison now for the next 25 years, right?
Yeah, because Lincoln was just giving permission at that point to, it's not like Lincoln sitting there on the panel with his wisdom deciding the cases. He's handing the panel over to perhaps some of the last places you ever want to find yourself in front of, and that is a military tribunal. You don't want to be in front of a military tribunal 99.9% of the time. You'd much rather be anywhere else.
In today's day and world, folks, if you know what, when we talk military tribunals, that is the equivalent today of going to Guantanamo Bay, right? This is what we're talking. That's that version of that back then. Like, you were not, the deck is stacked against you. The government picked the judge. The government picked the lawyers. The government picks how you have access. I mean, this is the worst kind of setup for due process as you can imagine. And so even in history, we've got these examples of even people that we revere, just sometimes they can't help themselves and to say, it's just easier if I can get these people to shut up, right? Rather than that order today, I think would be held unconstitutional under the First Amendment, right? Mm-hmm. Even though it's designed to assist in the war effort, I still think would be held unconstitutional under today's First Amendment jurisprudence that exists.
We would hope so. Like, that's our sensibilities today, is we would hope that would be found unconstitutional. But that's sort of the interesting thing when you start going through Supreme Court cases, and usually in a structured place like law school, you get to look at these things maybe in those contexts. You get to watch how Supreme Court jurisprudence evolves as the situation the nation is in changes. Some of the really interesting ones are the sort of the post 9/11 cases on habeas corpus, yeah. Right? You have one of the first 9/11 cases on habeas corpus. I'm gonna get the name wrong, but this is, I think, Hamdi versus Rumsfeld.
Yeah, and that was Scalia. Yep.
Yeah, and they ruled that if you were an American, I believe in this one, if you were an American who was arrested as a foreign combatant, then you went to Guantanamo. You did not have a right to a civilian trial or anything like that. That was decided in like 2003. And then when you get to later in the war, 2006 or 2008, you have a similarly named case. I think this is Hamdan, which was the foreign enemy combatant caught in foreign conflict, and they were entitled to full civil access. It's like, wait a minute. So an American citizen has to sit in a military brig and get heard before a military judge, but a foreign enemy combatant who is not a citizen of the United States gets access to the civilian court system. And that has a lot to do with how far away we were from 9/11 when the decisions are being made. Also, the justice that wrote them, Scalia in the first one, and I believe Kennedy wrote the second one. And so you get these weird things, and we see the same thing with World War II specifically. There's the treason. There's a treason case which I wish I remembered the name of it, but there's a treason case where it's an American of German descent. His son travels to Germany and returns to the United States. He is a spy. He lives with his father. The father allegedly has no knowledge that he's a spy. However, the father is the kid is captured. The father is tried for treason. There are no witnesses against him, and we specifically have treason laws. The treason provision of the Constitution says you have to have 2 witnesses, and we don't have tainting of blood. So we don't pass the treason of one relative to another relative. The treason has to be individually proved. And the father got something like 20 or 30 years in prison, as a traitor to the country. And it's because it was in the middle of World War II. They weren't going to let that guy go. And it's a miscarriage of justice under the Constitution what happened to him.
Well, and that's the tough part is to loop this back to where we started on this thing is to say, how do we draw these lines, right? We talk about true threat, and then we talk about the structure that way. Well, it's not that neat straight lines that we wish the law could be, right? I mean, as a lawyer, I wish we could just go in and say, okay, here's the Excel spreadsheet. Here's what you can and can't. Here it falls into this side or this side. And the problem is that I see a picture, for example, of Lucas's, firearm in a Snapchat as someone who went up to Lake Superior State. I don't see a problem with that. Like, not at all. Like, not even close to the line, right?
Yep.
But you have others, and I mean, I don't want to go too far in, but I mean, I can go to others. You saw the oral argument. There were certain members of the panel that just were not going to accept the fact that this gun was not a threat, right? And so where I would draw the line, and where maybe another judge would draw the line. I got on a black jacket tonight, but I don't wear a black robe. Where we draw the lines, a lot of times, unfortunately, is a product of our, and again, going back to where we started on this, biases, prejudices, preconceived notions, things that. As someone who is myself, and I know you are, as a strong First Amendment advocate, there's a lot of stuff that I would tolerate. I easily agree with the dogfighting video case, right? I mean, that to me is a no-brainer. But, you talk to someone like my wife, who is she came to watch those commercials where the dog is shivering and they're playing Arms of an Angel, where they want the donations. I mean, my wife would like be willing to string up those people for dog fighting, right? So you got, we're human, and of course, what happens, unfortunately, is sometimes the laws are made by we rule on our sleeves rather than by our principles, because we want to rule, and I say we in the legal profession, and of course, time goes on too. Is sometimes judges who've been there too long believe what they think is right is ultimately what the Constitution provides for. And I think the statement you made before about when you really hate what you're seeing, you should probably make sure your hackles are even up more as a judge. But it's too easy because, of course, you get to call the balls and strikes that way. And of course, my job as a lawyer and your job as a lawyer is to try to get the judge to say, Judge, you've got to call that one not a strike. It's not a strike, right? And even though you want to, Judge, I get it. Don't do it, right? But it's hard because they really, really, really want to call that as a strike.
They do. And that's being a judge would be a tough job because of that. It is hard to divorce yourself from your decisions and the impact, right?
Because the problem is you and I are going to be in the dissent club quite a bit. I have a distinct feeling, right? So you, me, and RBG, right? So
well, I'll crochet us some doilies to wear. Our dissent doilies.
Yeah.
So I got a couple comments here. So 200-watt studio says, wrong. Ronnie is innocent. He's just passionate. Plus been hit with 3 strikes. He called 911 at the same time. He said his son is lying now because of a new dad. Plus that hair doesn't lie. It stands up for the truth. Yes, I agree. I'm
going to have to pull up this as soon as I get off this broadcast. But I'll tell you what, I got to see this now because
it's fantastic. I don't know how else to describe
Well,
it.
how are they broadcasted on like court TV or something, or someone
No,
get it like?
it was a news camera inside the courtroom because they're behind the audience and they zoom in and out a couple times so you can see that they're pretty far back. It is hard to hear because he walks away from the microphone a lot. But you get the thrust of it pretty well. Mithrin Emmer says terroristic threat is an area in need of serious reform. Just in the state of Texas in 2019, juvenile arrests for making terroristic threats rose 54%. And I think that has to do with what I was saying about the way we communicate now. It's very easy to put a thought into communication to be viewed by a lot of people. And those people may not be intended recipients. There may not be an intended recipient, right? Like you could just say, oh man, I really want to kill that guy. Just screaming it to the void, but instead of the void, you throw it up on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And suddenly, it's someone's deciding that you're attempting to communicate a threat. And I think that's,
well, let me throw this out there because
Sure.
I can use a real life example from a client that I had, and I won't mention names, but I had a client who was on a football team, and the football team, now again, I don't know when I crossed over into being old, but I've crossed over into being old here. Okay. So found out, did not know this, but there was a thing going around Twitter and Facebook about you would take a picture of yourself holding a gun in a mirror up and say, don't come to school tomorrow. Right. and so what happened was, of course, the kid who was on the football team, all the football team did this. Okay. Except one kid tagged a kid that was not on the football team, and the kid thought it got shared and shared and shared until it got out to a girl, a high school girl, whose dad was a cop, and the sheriff's like, "Oh, hellfire came down on this kid," right?
Yeah.
So I was called in to defend him. Now, to be fair to you, I'm not a criminal law lawyer. Okay. I'm mostly an appellate attorney that does civil rights litigation, which kind of gets me into some criminal law stuff from time to time. But I got called in to defend this kid on a school board expulsion hearing because they wanted to string him up, kick him out of school. This kid's clearly going to bring his gun to school tomorrow. Of course, 3 searches on the internet, I find out that this is some kind of shit going around the internet, right? This was not a true threat. This was a joke. Maybe a bad joke, maybe in bad taste in light of school shootings, but not a threat, right?
Right.
Well, come to find out, one of the football players thought they'd be funny and held up a dildo instead of a gun, right?
Don't come to school.
So part of my defense was, is that a threat for this kid to hold up? I mean, it was a big old purple one, right?
You didn't bring the actual implement to the hearing, did you?
No,
oh,
I brought
gosh,
a
that would have been
photo
great.
of the kid. And of course, the superintendent is just horrified, right? That these kids are doing this. And so I said to him, how is this a threat when this is a known throughout the recipients of the message that this is a joke? Holding up a big old purple dildo is not something going around the internet, and you guys don't have a problem with, I mean, you don't like it, but you don't have a problem with this, right?
I take that as a threat. I'm terrified of that one way more than the gun.
Threatening a rape. It could be threatening something against a woman's consent or a guy's consent for that matter, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen Deliverance, for God's sakes, So the point is now, why is it that that school board was hung up on the gun, but not the big old purple dildo? They were doing the same thing, holding it up, saying, "Don't come to school tomorrow," right?
Right.
How do you, now pretend you're a lawmaker. How do you write a law that says, I don't want to punish a kid for making a joke, but I also want to figure out a way to make sure that this kid is actually intending to come shoot up the school tomorrow, that we can stop it ahead of time? Yeah. And I'll be the first to say it's tough. It's tough. I don't, as much as I, slam the government on stuff, it's a tough job to write these kinds of laws like this. No doubt about it.
Right.
But I hope that we err on the side of not destroying lives, because today the problem is, you did something stupid like that when I was growing up. The worst thing that would have happened to you is they would have called your parents, and Lord help you, you're in effing trouble, right?
Especially with the dildo.
Especially with moms, right? So
that's where you're gonna get hit.
well, yeah, so, yeah, there you go. So I mean, that was I mean, as a I would laugh when I was growing up. I'd be more willing to go to jail for the night than having to go home to deal with my parents if I got called on something like this. But in today's world, we've criminalized so much stuff. And like Lucas's case, the maximum penalty he's looking at is 20 years, right?
Yeah, which is insane.
This kid, they wanted to throw him out personally out of school, which in the education world, getting kicked out of high school for a threat like that is the kiss of death. You aren't going to college. You aren't going to, and folks, you talk about not going to college, that's going to mess up your career. I'll tell you, I'll bet you 90% of the friends that I have met their spouses in college.
Yep.
Right? That's messing up who you're going to marry, who your kids are going to be, where you're probably going to live, what kind of job you're going to have, all because, some people got overly sensitive about a purple dildo or a gun that was taken out of context, right?
Mm-hmm.
When neither one of them, and this is my opinion, neither one of them was a threat. They were teenage boys being stupid, right?
That's your job.
Teenage boy.
That's
you
your
were
job
a teenage,
as a teenage boy.
Sure, it was. Absolutely, it was. So, how do you draw those lines? It's tough, and I'll be the first to say it. It's tough. It's tough, but at the same time, I don't want to see people's lives ruined over a joke that got misconstrued or a joke that went badly. If a comedian does a bad joke, he just gets booed and he goes on to the next city, right? So these guys, they make a bad joke, they're looking at lives ruined, 20 years in prison.
Yeah, and I think the way you have to write those laws is what we've seen. I can't speak to Michigan's specific jurisprudence on true threats, but I can say Minnesota has pretty good law surrounding it. Now, how it gets put into play, what we typically see is people get charged with terroristic threats in addition to whatever else they're charged with, and that makes the plea deal just a little bit murkier. The prosecutors will use the threat charge to as a free card to throw away in we can turn this one down to a disorderly conduct or whatever. We'll reduce it to a misdemeanor, but we're going to have to talk about this other thing that they're charged with. So that's what kind of happens here. But the underlying law about threats in Minnesota is one, it has to be extremely specific. And this is where I don't know where Michigan's law came in, but this is where I'm talking from the Minnesota perspective during the hearing you did, is that in Minnesota, you can't use idiomatic meanings. You can't use metaphor. You don't get to draw these inferences. I mean, I was marveling when the prosecutor was making her leap about how this person said the snowflakes melting was like the bodies disappearing after they're dead. And I'm like, oh my God, is this a poetry class? Like, what are we doing here? Going through all of these levels of meaning to get to a threat. That's too far attenuated. And in Minnesota, we've carved that out. You don't get to do that. You have to threaten a specific criminal act of violence against someone. So in a weird way, if I say in Minnesota, I'm going to put you in the ground, that's not actually a terroristic threat, because putting someone in the ground might be putting them in an in-ground pool. You putting them, they can go in the basement or whatever. But if I say, I'm going to
bury them up to their necks in sand at the beach on a nice day in the summer in Minnesota.
Exactly. But if I say I'm going to chop off your fingers, right? Like that's a criminal specific threat. So that's one of the ways. I don't know how that is in Michigan. Is it that strict, or do they get some leverage on idiomatic meanings and stuff like that?
Michigan's case law is basically not developed at all. And I think that's where Lucas is struggling with his case, is that we just don't have, literally we can count, if for the listeners that were before, there's one case in Michigan, not very good. I say not very good, just not a very, factually, it's a weird case.
Sure.
It isn't. And of course, the old saying, bad facts make bad law. And I think this is a great example of that. The law is on our side, but it's barely on our side. So, I mean, I had to argue Watts, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, and I had to argue a case called DRC, which was a Washington State Appellate Division case, and say, I mean, I got to draw on court cases that are not even on this side of the country as the basis for my. And of course, you know, one of the things about being a lawyer is that when you're arguing to an appellate panel, you concern yourself with laws that are binding on the judge that are there. So if a higher court from them in the same state can be binding authority, and then other parts of it is what are called persuasive authority, which is just the judges can accept it, they might not accept it or whatever. You know, so Watts is binding. The Michigan, it's called Ostentowski, was binding, which wasn't that great anyways. The Washington State case, which was really favorable for, I think, is the correct standard, which is all the things you were railing about every 3 minutes when you were pausing and slowly getting intoxicated on the thing. But, you know, you got a judge that can say, I don't like this. I don't want to reach that conclusion. I'm going to reject that because Washington appellate courts are not binding on me, and they're not, right? So they can just flop that one off, even though I think it has exactly the right standard that should be applied. So long way around the barn there. Michigan just doesn't have a lot that's there. You know, I think for the large part is just because I think as a culture, Michigan's never really dealt with, I mean, threats aren't something we've dealt a lot with here in Michigan. And I say that, I think just people are a little more thicker skin. But what happens is you get that one wayward case like Lucas's, and it's like, how do you beat against that as the lawyer? Because all you've got is, you know, in a normal circumstance, in a normal civil rights case, I'm trying to navigate by splitting hairs between 12 cases, where here I've got one and it's not that great right off the bat.
Yeah, that's the worst thing. When you go into Westlaw and you type in your area of the case and you get like no results, and then you go, oh God, now I have to start really.
Well, and the worst part is that actually having a case run against you is actually better than having a case that's like on the line, because if it's against you, you can say, all right, I've got to go to a higher court and get that one overturned because it's so bad. I can go to the Michigan Supreme Court, which I go to regularly and argue cases. We'll argue this one. You know, the U.S. Supreme Court requires this particular outcome. You should overrule this crappy Court of Appeals decision. I get that. That's easier for me because I can know exactly the steps, the plans I've got to do. When you got a case like this, what happens is this kind of marginal on the line case where there's enough what I call meat on the bone for each side to pick out the little pieces of meat that they want on their particular end of the bone to get the particular outcome that they're looking for.
Right.
And it's tough. It's tough. And, you know, and you got judges a lot of times that just don't see your viewpoint in the world, which is funny because, and knowing this judge that I can get a little bit more on this than I normally would. This particular judge, she's ruled in my favor a good number of times on a good number of cases. I generally like this judge. But you could just tell in this particular case that she wasn't buying what I was offering from a legal argument standpoint. You know, and so that makes my job tougher because that means I know I have to get two. It's the rule of two, right? I got to get 2 out of 3 to win, you know, and when you got one against you, you know, you're down 1/3. Door number 1 is closed. You got to go through door. You got to get doors 2 and 3 to make it work. You know, it's like a bad game of The Price is Right that way. You know, so
what about as far as true threats go? Is there in Minnesota again? It's an intent element. You have to intend to deliver the threat. Is that now the problem with the intent element is that's a question of fact. Right. So that's not really a big appellate issue. Appellate issues, you're saying, is this speech actionable at all at its onset? I mean, when you're down to arguing whether the intent is there to convey a threat, that's probably going to be in front of a jury or a fact-finding judge, not an appellate court. So assuming this thing does get kicked back down, if it does, is that one of the elements that you'll have to argue against? 'Cause
Absolutely. Intent is always a critical part of any sort of criminal prosecution. I mean, I'm not a regular criminal prosecutor or a criminal defense attorney. I don't defend on prosecutions that much. I tend to be brought in on the appellate level on things. But one of the tough parts is that if you're arguing about intent, it's kind of like arguing about jury instructions, right? That's kind of your last train to Clarksville for you there, is if you're arguing that, right? And so one of the things, like in Lucas's case, this appeal that we took, we've got other things that we're going to argue later on. What we're trying to do is kill the law that it's based on. Essentially, we're trying to destroy, if you will. Oh my God, but maybe that's a true threat. I'm trying to destroy a law, right?
Oh no.
Watch out, right? You're trying to destroy the law because the law is wrong, as opposed to saying, I don't fit within this particular law for reasons X, Y, and Z. And so, I'm going to come back to where I started from. A lot of folks had some comments that were very critical of the way that I argued the case. Why didn't you argue X, Y, and Z? That wasn't the purpose of that particular type of appeal, because we were there, as you noted. It's called interlocutory. It's early. It's before the jury has the case. We're trying to tell the judge this should never, never, never go to a jury, because this law, the way the law is structured with the true threat analysis, this doesn't meet it at all. And the law that Michigan's trying to use to say this constitutes a true threat is not actually a true threat. And you should throw out that portion of the law, and at the same time, throw out the charges at the same time.
Right. Because if there is no law, then you can't charge under there's nothing to charge under.
Exactly
therefore
right.
Lucas goes. But yeah, it's a tough road. And I think the most frustrating part of Lucas's case, and I think this is one of the unsung tragedies of the lockdowns and the COVID aspect, is there are a bunch of criminally accused people out there who have either been in custody or on some sort of lockdown. And that window of time, which is already, when you talk to criminal defendants, for many people, it's the worst thing they've gone through in their entire life. Being accused of a serious crime. They've had to endure that for an extra 9 months to a year, longer than they might already be enduring it. I mean, Lucas's case, he's been locked down for 18 months almost, and it's a felony threat is the charge, which is, it's a serious crime. We're talking 18 months and no trial is the type of stuff you hear on serious murder cases,
right?
Where you're talking about having to, this is a murder case that hit the news. You have to let that news cool down so you can impanel a jury that'll be impartial and won't be influenced by it. I mean, we're talking about the guys, the cops in Minnesota who are accused as accessories in the killing of George Floyd have not stood trial yet. And it's starting to feel like a very long time because we're in excess of a year. But those are the types of cases where it takes this long to get a prosecution out. But now we've got a whole class of people who've had to wait a significant amount of time. Do you think there's any sort of impact or fallout from that? I mean, one of my biggest regrets, just personally, is if I would have known the pandemic was coming last year before we had even heard about it, there is a case where I would have demanded a speedy trial, right? And instead, we waived the right to a speedy trial, which was fine. We had no reason to speed it up, no benefit to speeding it up. But then COVID hit, and it's like, oh, okay, well, this thing's dragging on forever. It's like, oh, man, if we would have had a speedy trial, they would have had 60 days. They would have had to fight this thing during COVID. We could have made some arguments about the delays and tried to get it thrown out. It would have opened up a lot of options. But what are your opinions on how lockdowns have impacted legal practice?
Well, I mean, so to be fair, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm not a criminal law defending attorney very often. So most of my stuff, I don't live in that world where criminal defense is there. But I'll say this, I'm in Saginaw County, Michigan, which is one of the more, we're blessed to have more of the criminals in our neck of the woods than in other parts of Michigan. And right now, our chief judge just had at a social function that they just had said the earliest that we're going to have civil jury trials is next March.
Jeez.
Which means, and the reason why I say that's important is because that means those who are sitting in jail, those who are sitting out on bond, are going to be tried. I mean, if you were arrested in February of 2020, you haven't seen the inside of a courtroom yet. And just because they're turning the trials back on doesn't necessarily mean your trial's ready. It doesn't necessarily mean that your trial is up to a point where you can get, pre-trial stuff's got to be dealt with. And there's a lot of things that just aren't going to happen. So even if you talk about civil trials starting in March, which I think is with the backlog I'm seeing in Saginaw County, I think that's even too hopeful. But because right now they're still doing a lot of them in Michigan where they're still doing a lot of the social distancing. Well, a lot of these courtrooms are not designed with that social distancing. They want to call in 100 potential jurors to come in to seat 12 or 13 or 14 of them. I mean, normally it's 13 or 14 for a criminal case. For a civil, we usually pick 7 because we have a petite jury in Michigan. So for those that don't know what that is, that means in civil world, you only have to have 5 out of 6 jurors agree to a verdict to get a civil outcome on a particular case. So criminal, it's still 12, right? You got to have unanimous,
right.
12. That's the standard for criminal. Civil, you only have to have 5 out of 6. So a lot of times civil can go faster. We don't have to go through impaneling 12, 13, 14 jurors.
Sure.
And it's not always 12. It's always going to be 13 or 14 with a criminal. It's going to always be 6 or 7 with a civil case. It's just going to take time to do these kinds of things. And there's certain cases as a civil rights attorney. I got one right now I'm dealing with right now that I am going to take to a jury. I will wait till this pandemic goes to 0 and they open the courtroom and to have a jury trial over a judge trial any day. I mean, I'll wait till the end of time to have this jury trial, right?
Right.
Because I think a jury is going to be far more sympathetic and far more, in my opinion, just than a judge is ever going to be. So, I mean, the practice of law has gone. Now, one positive, I will say, and let me flip the other side. Turn it from the negative Nancy side to, and I'm sure I'm getting comments about the negative Nancy thing, but the flip side of that is that one of the things our Michigan court has done, which has been fantastic, is we have adopted Zoom lock, stock, and barrel. Our chief justice on our Michigan Supreme Court, who acts as the chief judicial officer in Michigan, has adopted Zoom like a religion. And so right now, a lot of the judges thought, well, once the pandemic's done, we'll go back to lawyers in the courtroom. And for me, for example, as a lawyer who drives a lot I have cases all over the state. I could have like Monday, I've got a hearing in a county on the other side of the state. That's a 2.5 hour drive for me to go there, 2.5 hour drive. With Zoom, I'm on in 5 seconds, right?
Right. Yeah. It's kind of nice.
And the nice part about it is my clients can log on, who are sometimes they're in other parts of the state. They can actually be there, and it gives them greater access to see what's going on, so that rather than me trying to explain to them what's going on, they can see with their own eyes, which helps them understand the process a little bit better too. And I don't care what you say. It's always better to see something and talk about it afterwards than a lawyer trying to explain what happened, because what happened when I see something happening and you see something happening. I mean, you were just talking about being criminally charged is the worst thing that happens in a person's life, and very likely is. For you and I, that's a normal day at the office.
Yeah.
Right. The stuff we're dealing with. This is. We got a dozen of these, and I've got an active caseload in the double digits going all the time. Right. This is not unusual. For most people, it's not the worst. And if it's not the worst thing, it's certainly on the top 10 list.
It's a bad day this year. That's for
That's it.
sure.
It's not like not everybody's happy Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on that one, you know. So, but so yeah, there's been some positives, but the hard part is with the criminal side stuff. I can't imagine if you've been. They just had a story I just saw. Oh, where was that at? The guy sat in jail for like the last 18 months through all this crap with COVID. Literally came out, was found guilty, and was charged to like a day with time. I mean, he's 18 months to get charged with a one day offense. It's insanity.
Yeah,
Absolute insanity. You
that's
know?
been one of the things. It's like, yeah, especially, fortunately for Lucas, he's at least on house arrest.
Yes.
At least, which I still think is a
It's
travesty of justice, but
and that's still tough.
yeah.
That's still psychologically and physically and mentally tough. I mean, anybody who thinks imagine when you're sick, when you're home from school, you're home from work sick. Imagine you've been home sick for 18 months and you
Yeah.
can't leave, you can't use the internet, you can't see your friends, you can't use your phone. So it's not like you're sitting around having a good time on stuff. It's literally you're sitting there doing nothing.
Oh yeah, because he has, since he used an internet app on a phone for the communication of the threat, part of his release conditions or his house arrest conditions, as it were, would likely involve not being able to use those devices, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
God, oh, that's
That's
got to be
correct.
so frustrating.
I mean, I'll just tell you, we had a power outage here, normal regular power outage for like a half a day, and I about lost my mind without having internet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my whole practice, my whole professional life, my personal life. I mean, I laugh. I mean, I'm on my cell phone looking at our power company, like praying to sweet Jesus that the Mauer map would be, please. And then they always update it like, well, you'll be back by 2:00. And then it's like, oh, you'll be back at 4:00, and he's back at 6:00. And as I'm on my phone, like pleading with this map to deliver me power services, he's been without essentially, and I know it's not the same, but essentially without the essentials,
right?
Internet and phones and things like this for almost 2 years. I just, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. We've tried to do some things with it. We got a few more things we're going to be trying. I can't get into right now,
Right,
but
of course.
but I mean, we try. And the hard part is when your bond conditions are largely the discretion of the judge, and it's tough because judges we give those judges a lot of power. With the stroke of a pen, they can dictate how you conduct your lives. Now, I am glad, very, very glad that at least he's out and not sitting in a jail cell. I mean, that would be driving. I mean, that would be really driving on, harping on my soul if he was. But I'm still not happy where he's at. But at least he's home. He's around family. He's got a support structure around him that way. He's got his lawyers out here working, weird hours of the night talking about this case. But nonetheless, it's important. That's why I want to make sure that when we talk about these things, I'm glad you're talking about these things, for people, if you get whacked with something, right, get a lawyer, don't talk to the cops, right? Those are the important things that way. So, because otherwise, guess what? You and you're going to be one of those people we're talking about. Well, he's been stuck in jail for 18 months while he's been waiting to see a judge. And let me tell you, those judges, they're all old.
Yep.
They don't want to catch COVID, right?
They don't want to catch
might be a
COVID.
death sentence for an old judge, right? An old curmudgeon-y judge, right? And so they're not going to, if it's between their lives and yours, you ain't going to win. So they'll let you catch COVID over them any day of the week, but it's tough. I mean, even what I would call the good judges are struggling just because the obstacles seem to be somewhat, I mean, they're not insurmountable, but they're large. They're large, and there's no real clear end in sight. And of course, in Michigan, I'm going to pivot here just a minute. You were talking before about things of lockdown and our governor and things like
Right.
that. And Michigan,
Yeah.
Michigan's has been a state that's been very unusual in that we kind of have the bouncing ball of Michigan shutdowns, right? We get a shutdown, and then right before it expires, it gets changed and re-upped, and you can only do this on Sundays after 4 in a bar that's only got a 75% capacity, and et cetera, et cetera. It's been a tough because, for the legal system, we operate on, how would you say that? How would you explain? I mean, we operate on a kind of a tradition, a set rhythm to things.
Yeah. Well, just I get just a common way of doing things. I don't know, maybe
meaning there's kind of an informed, even though there's nothing that says it has to be done, ding, ding, ding. There's a certain rhythm to most court cases. In most of those court cases, judges also get a rhythm and it helps them keep cases moving through their dockets, and keep things up to date, et cetera, et cetera. When we keep opening and closing courthouses and opening and closing society, and you can come in today and you can't come in today, and you can by Zoom and then not by Zoom. I mean, it just adds a level of complexity in that when you break those kind of traditions, it doesn't make things move smoothly, and lack of smoothness. We're already in a system that doesn't run that smooth.
Well, yeah, I mean, for example, I use Westlaw for research purposes. And when I was in more active practice, I had their firm management software. And when you use it properly, you put stuff in, and according to your jurisdiction, it calendars out deadlines for you. It's like, okay, you serve this on this date. Their response is due this date. Your reply to that is due this date. It lays that out. That's all of that trial management software is out the window. Now you have to have, and for really small practices, that could be devastating if they didn't have a paralegal, solo firm attorneys or who don't have an administrative department to kind of keep that stuff on track with the opening and closing of courthouses.
Well, I can tell you, I'm a one lawyer outfit. It's just me, but I have an assistant who, honest to sweet God, if she wasn't around keeping this train running, I mean, I would be living under a bridge somewhere, honest to God, because things get moved and shifted and changed, and judge can't come in today. Judge not coming in. We've had judges caught COVID. Judge is not coming in. When's he coming in? We don't know. We'll call you, or you get a phone call. Judge wants to see you this afternoon now because he's trying to catch up on his docket that he screwed up on, 2 weeks ago. And I mean, it's a nightmare. And so that's been a tough but that translates, for me, it's an annoyance, right? It's just, or I shouldn't even say annoyance. That's not fair. It's just a different way of doing business. For my clients, this is affecting their lives, right?
Yep.
Civil or criminal, it's affecting their lives that way, and so that's been one of the hard parts in Michigan, is we just, we don't know what we're dealing with. And of course, we keep playing kind of the bouncing ball of we're doing this today and not this today. And so my office is doing some lawsuits against the governor. We're one of the lawsuits, law firms that is bringing some suits against the governor and against certain officials. We beat back a couple of them so far. We've had one case that we had one where the kid got whacked with he was out on a boat. Right?
Oh man.
He was out on a boat. Now you're from Minnesota. I'm from Michigan. All right. So let's get a little smack talk down right now. Michigan or Minnesota, every one of your stupid license plates, it says the land of 10,000 lakes, or at least it used to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Michigan's got 13,000. You're just bragging about being in second place, right? So
I think we're in third because Wisconsin's got more than us too.
Failures, just failures.
Absolute sham of a state.
Your marketing department really needs to be slapped around. But anyways,
especially because we outproduce Wisconsin in cheese, and they're the cheeseheads. This is ridiculous. This is shenanigans.
So what? It's just the lawyer podcast, or what you're becoming known for in Minnesota now? 3M and lawyer podcast, right?
That's it. We got medical devices. We got 3M. And we've got lawyer podcasts, only the best lawyer podcasts.
I was going to say, doesn't Minnesota have that one little spot up by the Canadian border where you got to drive through Canada to get into it?
Yes.
Is that Minnesota? You've got that. You got the tab of Minnesota then too. Congratulations. But anyway, so Michigan, for those who are not from this kind of water wonderland thing, if you're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, boating, water access, big deal, right? Big
Huge deal.
deal, right? It's like probably having a pet alligator in Florida or something. I don't know, but anyway,
Yeah, it's
big
part of
deal,
the
right?
culture.
Part of the culture, right? Even folks that I would call middle class, working class folks have places up north on cabins that have lake access. Kid I represented goes out on the bay. The governor literally the day before he's going out fishing says, "Oh, we're not going to allow boats to go out on the water because of COVID."
Which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
So they charge him with this thing, right? And they, I took the case because it was this governor. It was a COVID fight, right? So I took the case, and the charge is that he was out boating. And of course, I challenged this. I challenged the governor's authority to even issue this order to begin with as a defense to the case, which is hence why I took it, right?
Yes.
Well, then lo and behold, the prosecutor comes back and says, well, we didn't charge him because he was on a boat. Oh, you didn't? Well, that's interesting because that's what you were charged with. It's because he was sitting within 6 feet of the other guy in the boat. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you, I mean, really? Really?
It's like a reverse.
You violated the social distancing order. And of course, literally the next week, the governor was marching in Detroit, arm in arm with people in Detroit.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait. He just got whacked for being out in the middle of the lake, as about as far away as you, and I say the lake, it's the Saginaw Bay, right?
Yeah.
So the Saginaw Bay, you drive like 12 miles out into the bay, right? Like you're not, I mean, you're not seeing land with how far you're up. They whacked this guy for this, and he was looking at, it was a misdemeanor. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world, but those things can follow you. I mean, this guy goes to work. He's sometimes going to have work problems with all of this, but you don't want any criminal record if you can help it, right? Obviously.
And either way, even if it's a misdemeanor, you're going through the court process, so you're charged with a crime. You've got to pay a lawyer to defend yourself. You're not going to recoup that cost. You may have to pay for any probation stuff that you have going on either before or after trial if you plea it out. You're going to have to pay a fine. You may have to do community service. You may spend a weekend in jail. Depending on your criminal history, you could spend up to 90 days in jail on a misdemeanor.
Yep.
They're not a big deal, but only in reference to a felony, which is that much worse. But a misdemeanor, when you think about it, it's what kind of the topic we're on in general tonight is. It's the deprivation of some essential liberties: your time, your freedom, and your treasure. I mean, those are the things we work our entire lives for.
Further, your good name too.
Exactly.
Your good name, right? So now
some of us have a good name.
Well,
some of us.
My name's Mud. I was told by the Attorney General, the guy who used to work in the Attorney General office. Your name is Mud in our office, but so ask me what they charged the other guy with, who was within 6 feet in that boat.
What did they charge him with?
Nothing.
Of course.
Amazing, right? The one guy. Now, so I'm conceptualizing this as being two people in a boat within 6 feet of each other. One guy gets charged. The other guy, who is still 6 feet away, doesn't get charged.
Well, they didn't have probable cause on that guy.
Oh, well, it was terrible because they had a picture, the DNR office had a picture of them and two goofballs standing there with, standing right next to each other on this boat out there, Anyway, we end up winning the case. It got dismissed. We end up winning the whole thing, whatever. But this is the problem when you talk about, the governor issuing these executive orders. This isn't fun and games, right? This guy is looking at a criminal charge. Do I think he was going to go down for the count on this? No, but there was a really hot political, because a lot of folks say he should not have been out on that boat. They literally changed the law at 5 o'clock the night before he went out.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, and again, going back to your ultimate point there is that this is the dumbest law you can imagine. Like, what does being on a boat have to do with COVID? Like, because I guarantee you, if he's not out on the boat with his friend, he's just going to be hanging out with his friend. Like, that's like, well, I guess the governor says we can't go on the boat. So I guess we'll just throw a few beers back in the house then and watch TV. You know, I mean, it's a silly thing. The way you were describing it, it sounded like the reverse of a sovereign citizen argument, right?
Well,
where it's like the government, it's like, well, he wasn't boating. He was within 6 feet of someone while on a boat. We don't want to charge him with active boating here. He's just traveling. We know this guy. He's an Article 4 free inhabitant, but he is too close to the other guy.
Dude, there's been so many of these things. I mean, it's just absolute insanity. And but it's been an interesting but you know, there's a large number of people that have been very supportive of her work. You know, I mean, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let me play devil's advocate.
You're a brave man.
I truly believe that she's got good intentions. I believe that. Okay. Now I know I'm from amongst my friends who are like-minded like me. I'm the minority, the minor minority. I think she has good intentions, but the problem with that approach that our governor has taken is that the next guy or next gal who gets in there who doesn't have good intentions, who really doesn't have good intentions, guess what? They're using Whitmer's precedents to, oh my God, Michigan, we have actually I'm ripping this off from Matt, my co-counsel, on a lot of this. Michigan's got a immigration problem. We don't have an immigration problem. Sometimes we got to kick some Canadians back across the border in the UP, but
get the Canadians out immediately.
Yeah. So
they're a blight on everything.
Problem in Michigan, right? But the Governor Badass now, who's coming after Whitmer, says we do. I'm invoking my emergency powers and I'm locking people down to deal with this immigration problem. We've got, I know the governor, for example, she was using some executive orders to do with bias training in Michigan, for example. All of a sudden now that's an emergency to invoke the emergency powers that are there. That's dangerous precedent right there. So, the old idea, the old concept or the old quote about the road to hell is paved with good intention. The road to hell is paved with good intention. So even if you have good intentions, right? It can lead to some very terrible stuff, whether it's now or in the future. So my goal is when litigating these, and I tell these folks I got friends of mine who work for Governor Whitmer. I'm friends of mine, actually work in her office, right?
Yeah.
I don't want what you're doing to provide the platform for someone else to do even worse. Because I'll tell you what, it's that line. It's the line. I'm going to cop it from and of course, this is the cheeseball, this movie, but it's when Harrison Ford in Air Force One, right? It says, when we have a cookie to a monster, what happens? They want a glass of milk, right?
Oh,
you give the government a cookie and they're going to want 2 glasses of milk, right?
Yeah.
So that's
no, it's right. And we see these articles. There's an article that I saw today or yesterday, I can't remember. And it was COVID deaths paths 600,000 in the country. And then it was the spread is outpacing vaccinations. And so it's like, okay, well, this is setting up for just yet another lockdown. I mean, all of this stuff is just setting up for the next thing that the government's going to do. And I'm happy to see in a couple states, some of the fights going well. I know you've had some success against some of Whitmer's orders down in Florida. They just found an old mask mandate that's no longer there. So that is purportedly unconstitutional. Or presumptively unconstitutional. Kentucky, they're reviewing Andy Bashir's orders, even though they're ending. And it's like, well, we're finally seeing some progress on this stuff because it's not, I was sounding the alarm bells on shutdowns at the beginning as, okay, government's not going to give this up if you let them shut it down. And there were a lot of people on the right who were in favor of these shutdowns. I actually debated a guy who was very much in favor of the government shutting down. And it was in the context, I don't know if you remember this, at the very early stages of COVID, there was a guy who was released from a hospital. He left the hospital, went home, and Andy Bashir in Kentucky posted armed guards outside his house for 14-day quarantine and forced him to stay inside his home because they said that that he had tested positive for COVID. Neither the spouse, the guy, or their attorneys could find any medical record that he was even tested while in the hospital. He was in the hospital for some unrelated heart condition. And they, you know, they're like, all we did was go home. The hospital told us to go home. And there were people on the right and the left saying, no, they should absolutely lock these guys up because, you know, people are going to die. COVID's going to be way worse than everybody thinks. And it's going to be this bad thing. And I'm over here like, but liberty though, but freedom a little bit. You know, I'm not so sure I want armed guards enforcing quarantines outside of my house because a hospital worker says I could potentially be sick.
Well, there was in Michigan this horror. I'm litigating it right now. There is a horrifying story of. So let me take a half step back. So in Michigan, we have our statewide health department. It's called the Department of Health and Human Services. And then in each county, you have a county health officer, and they have different powers between them that were all enacted in, 1802, right? It's that, back when back when there were horses running around, right? So,
yeah.
Okay. So none of these laws have been touched in 100 years or more. And so these health officers, there was one particular health officer that is over in, I'll even say it's out in Kent County, which is Grand Rapids, one of our biggest cities, right? He petitioned without notice to anybody, filed this kind of blanket petition and asked for a court to grant him the authority to detain anyone on his say-so that said that he could order them to quarantine. If they didn't quarantine, he would have a general warrant to go out and arrest these people and hold them at a detention center at his choosing without any sort of due process, without any sort of hearing, without any sort of anything. I mean, as much as you were shocked the other day about the First Amendment stuff, I'm sitting here because I do a lot with the Fourth Amendment stuff, just dumbfounded because I found out the judge signed the damn order.
Oh my God.
I couldn't believe it. Like, okay, I can kind of understand these public health officers. There's a conflict between freedom-loving people and public health people. There's a clash. There's just no doubt about it. There's a clash, right? I just could not believe the judge signed the order. And so, of course, then when this kind of broke and all of a sudden there was no case number, there was no hearing, there was no attorneys, any of the usual setup to know that this was there. Anybody who would have gotten detained by this order, we would have never known about because they would have no mechanism by which to see a judge, call somebody, have counsel, or anything like this, right?
Yeah.
All on the say-so of this particular health officer. I mean, this was the madness that was going on where it's like this guy, so for folks that don't know, general warrants are something that are explicitly rejected by the Fourth Amendment. That was a concept that was from Britain where magistrates would give constables and different law enforcement officers and whatever, and these weren't like Mary Poppins type people, right? These are people that what they would do is they would just go and pull you and take you in the dead of night and you weren't found again, right? And the officer had the authority because he had this general roving continuous warrant that exists. Under our Fourth Amendment, general warrants are prohibited. Judges or the law enforcement officer has to prove to a judge probable cause.
Yep.
But usually under either a sworn statement or by a sworn affidavit under the penalty of perjury, for what that's worth.
It's kind of a hollow threat these days.
At least it's something, I guess, but it's not much in today's day. But anyway, but you'd have to go at least before a judge and say, Judge, here are the reasons why I think this person should be. And hopefully the judge would say, okay, there's enough probable cause here to show that this person should be detained until such time as we could have a hearing, right? At
Yep.
least, I mean, something at least like that, right? No, so he wanted this general, I get to arrest anybody I want to order because I'm the health officer of Kent County. This was the madness that was going on, where it was like, you know, I guess I'll leave it as this. The whole point of the Constitution is not to operate when things are going well.
Right.
The whole point of this document and these principles espoused in this document is for when things have shit that's hit the fan and when things are going bad, right? And it's the old idea of what's the old fortune cookie idea of, ethics or what you have is when nobody's watching. But it is, right? I mean, the Constitution is supposed to be, in this case, that health officer who is a sworn government official, swore to uphold the Constitution, threw that sucker in the shredder as soon as he heard the word COVID and ran out there to do it. And a judge signed off on it, right?
Yeah, it's that's the whole thing, and that's what we're starting to see in some of these rulings, is that the Constitution is not a suggestion to be thrown out when things get a little bit weird. When the Constitution is not subject to a pandemic. The things you do during a pandemic are subject to the Constitution. And that's it's encouraging to see that, but the rate at which we've seen some of these statements come from the courts is too low, in my opinion. We have not.
Oh, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay, so I have a couple chats.
Yep.
Blackhawks 81H says, I went to LSSU in the late 90s, early 2000s. I can't even believe this case is a thing. Everyone from campus security to Sue PD back then would have never taken this seriously at all. Mr. Ellison, ever drink at the BD?
Well, heck yes.
So what's the BD?
The BD is the back door.
Oh, okay.
Not the most, we'll call that place colorful. We'll call it that, right?
It's a dive bar.
Yeah, it's a dance club / meat locker / yeah. It was at the BD. That's where so I was the RA, right? I was usually the one fishing somebody out of the BD to get home, because if they tried to walk home in that Sault Ste. Marie weather, they were going to die, right? So I was personally more of myself of Maloney's man myself rather than a BD, but yeah, that was that's a true sign that that guy is a Laker. True and true. Because he probably was hit on if he was hanging out down there by some of the Canadians, because when that time frame, because I went there in early 2000s as well, Canada had placed a smoking ban in the public places. Michigan, you could still smoke in the bars.
Oh.
All of a sudden, and again, we'll use the word colorful Canadians came across the border and would be at places like the BD, and he might not it's amazing he survived, probably. So
it's rough and tumble Canadians.
That's right.
Mega Mobas says, but has Phil had a person sign into Zoom with the moniker Buttfucker 3000? That's the real question.
Michigan's #1, St. Joe County. No, we've not had that.
Have you had cases?
Well, Michigan has had that. That was down in St. Joe County. That was a Michigan. That what's made us tried and true. We also had the guy naked appear in Bay County too. Yeah, he that was awkward. I wasn't on that, fortunately, but we've got some real Zoom superstars here in Michigan. But make sure. Let me just throw this out there: if you're going to go to court, two things. I used to only say one thing. Going to court is the time that you really want to invest in a nice shirt or a nice outfit. Don't show up to court in what you're going to go see your grandma. Go down, spend the $30, get the Stafford shirt, turn on that iron, right?
Yeah.
This is your one chance to make an impression in about 4 minutes that you're going to be in there.
Yep.
Don't mess it up by showing up with your grease stains and your old t-shirts. Like, dress up, right? The second one now I will say is make sure the name on your Zoom account is equally impressive, right? Now, I never thought I'd have to give that advice, but that's the world we live in now. So, clean shirt, clean name on Zoom.
You heard it here. The equally impressive Zoom name. So not Butt Effort 3000, but call yourself the old 13-incher.
I mean, well, at least call yourself Galaxy something, so you could plausibly say, "Oh, it was my phone, Judge, or it's just iPhone on you." If you're using the word "butt" or "effer" on anything, you're already 3 steps behind. But fortunately, that judge is actually a pretty decent guy. So
yeah, Jeffrey Middleton is the judge.
Yep. He's a decent guy, and so I think he accepted the fact that somebody pulled a fast one on him, because I mean that's the kind of stuff that can end you up with contempt pretty fast on that.
That's the funniest. I heard it was the guy's sister, and that, in my opinion, that is the purest expression of siblinghood on the planet. He asked her to set up his Zoom account so he could go to court. She's like, "All right, I've got you, you scumbag." Just sets it up. That makes me so happy.
Well, let's throw this out there. Is that protected First Amendment speech?
I think it.
Tough question. I mean, it goes to the decorum of the court, and
I think you'd have to show that it was in some way expressive political speech, because it goes back to that guy who wore the jacket in court, right? That said "fuck the draft" back in Vietnam.
Right.
That's the only thing I can think of for how you make the argument. You don't want to make that argument.
You don't want to be that test case, guys. You do not want to be that test case. But let me just say, that's the tough, like we were talking about line drawing earlier, looping back to the top of this thing. How do you draw the line there, right?
I think it should be protected. I mean, I think it should be, I don't think anybody should get any sort of criminal penalty. However, I mean, you're going to probably piss off the judge.
Right.
So I don't think a contempt charge is correct, but the judge is maybe going to set your bond a little bit higher within his discretion. He's going to add some conditions, whatever. And that's,
well, let me say, I know judges that would have thrown that guy in jail for the full 91 days. There's no doubt in my mind that they would have done that. But luckily, this guy probably has a sister that pulled some crap, not Zoom, but other things that and maybe sympathetic that way. So,
anyway. Mithran Emrys says, "Things you call a lawyer who couldn't make it: Congressman, Governor, Senator, Your Honor, and Madam Vice President."
Well, so if this lawyer thing doesn't work out for you, you can join with some of these guys with the comments and start a comedy routine. It sounds like here. So,
I find it really interesting that you said kind of your real wheelhouse is Fourth Amendment stuff.
So I do a lot of First and Fourth Amendment, and I should say First, Fourth, and Fifth. I would say would be the kind of the ones that I'm most into.
Sure.
I don't do a lot of Second Amendment stuff. I do a little bit of due process stuff. My actual other half of what I do, because we really didn't get into my background. My real background, how I started originally.
I meant to do this.
I'm a property rights attorney.
Oh, okay.
So my actual specialty, and you're going to laugh when you hear this, I'm a water rights attorney, which is why I knew about the lakes, right? So
yes.
I started in that back, over 10 years ago. That led to issues with the government with wetlands.
Oh my God, the worst. Worst. I live in a small town. I've had a wetlands case in my very small practice, and it was this guy. He owns several hundred acres of farmland, and a good chunk of that is a state-created slough. There's a creek that ran and flowed into a lake that's across the road. The state built a dam on the property that backs up the water, and it creates this, probably 85-acre slough. And there was the guy, bless his heart, is, he's a little bit touchy and a little bit crazy, but he's a nice guy in general. But he's very paranoid that the government was after him. And he kept telling me, he's like, "They're flying drones over my house." I'm like, okay, whatever. This is a tiny county in Minnesota, sure. But turns out he was right. They were flying drone cameras over his property. And there were some beaver dams that had gotten built inside the feeding creek that went into this slough. And so he went in and cleared out the beaver dams, but he did it over the period of like 2 days. So he pulled the dirt out of the channel and he set it on the land next to the channel. And so they said he dumped a bunch of fill into the wetland. And it was a nightmare because he hated everybody at the DNR here. It was a nightmare to try and navigate that. But I eventually, I acted as intermediary and talked with the DNR. We got them out there to show that he wasn't actually dumping fill onto the land, that he was just clearing stuff out. And, their aerial photos the day that he did it were of all the stuff kind of lined up on the sides. And all he ended up having to do was just push it kind of back into the water and got it cleared out. It was not a big deal. But
so you talked really, really fast, it sounds like, to this DNR officer or DNR official then.
I had to keep them off the property so he didn't kill them. This is a man who's very, very distrustful of government because of a whole lot of long stories. But like, he has signs on the door that says, if you're a government agent, get out because the gun's on you. You don't have permission to be here. Show up with a warrant. And he didn't trust. He knows all these guys by name. They know him. And, they're trying to just walk out onto his land. I'm like, whoa. You let me go with you. Let me, we need to do this as a collaborative effort. Because it was all based on this misunderstanding. But oh my gosh, what I learned.
That's how I started. Literally, that's how I started, and that got me into Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and then I've always been just naturally turned into started doing civil rights stuff. And I'm actually I have about 30 class action lawsuits going in the state of Michigan right now.
Jeez.
With some issues involving the Fifth Amendment rights. And so, yeah, I have a very active, busy practice that way. So I literally, as I was joking with you at the top of this, I'm from a small town. If you get a DUI or you want to get divorced or you want to, if you want to try to get you want to have a business transaction, don't stop by here, right? It's just, I don't have time, right? So,
right.
But I literally, a water law attorney and a civil rights attorney is how I would describe it. And so that's what got me into that. And now it's kind of whatever floats my boat. And it's always tied to some sort of civil rights issue is what it usually is tied into. So yeah, that's how I got into that. And when I started law school, I was just I come from a business background, had an MBA before I went to law school. Thought corporate law was where I was going to go. Bankruptcy, whatever. I was a bankruptcy intern back in the day with a federal judge, and thought I was going that route. And then literally tried a water case, realized nobody was doing these things.
And I mean,
a decade and a half later, here I am with you. So
peak attorneydom. You showed up on an internet talk show. Those water rights cases, though, like that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest and most pervasive infringements of individual property rights that exists.
I agree.
The way they operate. I mean, you are not presumed innocent in a DNR case in Minnesota, and I assume it's the same in Michigan.
Exactly the same.
You are guilty, and in Minnesota, if you challenge the order, first of all, they issue like a civil order on you, and you can challenge the civil order, but if you fail the civil order challenge, you basically get a misdemeanor criminal charge thrown at you, and then you've now established the record that you improperly challenged the civil order, so you're going to end up losing that one. And it's this coercive, nasty system where they tell you what you can and can't do on your own property. It drives me nuts. I hate it.
Well, I kind of work in projects. I have my normal caseload, and then I have kind of the big tilting at windmills case, and I've got one of those going right now. My next project is these wetlands, because that is one of the areas where the government has basically said, we want to use your land to protect cattails and turtles and snails and whatever, right? And hey, You know what? That's great. If that's important as a society that we need to preserve those kinds of things, great. Buy the land.
Right.
Buy the land. You know, and frankly, you can take the land with eminent domain. Take the land then, even, right? But what they want to do is they want you to pay all the taxes on it. They want you to hold the land. They want you to take care of the land, but they don't want you to allow you to use the land in the way that they don't want you to use it.
Yep.
That's my next big project that's coming down the line. So, but that's a couple years out yet. But that's an area just ripe, ready for some sort of massive challenge to that. Because what happens is most people are just so desperate to get the permit for what they want to do, which I don't blame them. Who wants to who wants to spend 10 years fighting a bureaucracy that way, right?
Fight 10 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the haul of it, and then at the end you might not win anyway.
Right. And so that's the next area. You got to find the right client with the right cause with the right facts, but that's how I got into it. And of course, next thing you know, I'm arguing things like Lucas's case, which is surprise, I get pulled into. But yeah, I do a lot of water, I do a lot of civil rights, and I spend a lot of my time at appeals courts is what I do a lot of that way. So
yeah.
But
well, someday in the future, because I know it's late, and so I wanna respect your time. I've already disrespected it by like an extra hour.
That's fine. If I wasn't having fun, I would have we would have had an internet problem, right?
Yes.
Oh, my internet got cut out here, right? So
sometime in the future, I would love to have you back to talk about implications of the Fourth Amendment in the digital age, because we have a new way for the government to monitor pretty much everything we do that in the 30s would have been, one, technologically impossible. And if they could have mustered the manpower and ability to do it without the electronics involved, it would have been unlawful. But now, these sorts of monitorings that go on through our cell phones, through metadata, through GPS devices and stuff like that, and being able to just simply request these as business records from other companies, what they're able to do goes so far beyond the scope of Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, and the courts are so far behind. I would love to talk about kind of just conceptually that sort of topic, because that's what I wrote my final paper in law school on, was this coming digital surveillance that, I mean, in a lot of ways it's here, but it's growing every single year as they find newer ways to follow us. And I think it's crazy. And we even found out recently that like cryptocurrency is not as secure as people thought, because they were able to recover transactions through cryptocurrency for the ransom that was paid for the oil pipelines.
I saw that. Yep.
It's like that was one of the selling points of crypto is the inability to undo and trace and undo these transactions or whatever from the outside, and yet they were able to do that anyway. And so the implications of all that are just kind of fascinating to me.
If you want, we could talk about the paper I wrote as my final paper in law school.
I definitely want
Canadian softwood import tariffs and the impact on the American consumer.
Look, I've heard all Canadian wood is softwood.
It is. Well, not almost all of it is. And I studied. There's got to be some terrible jokes you're going to start getting in the comment section. I just know it's coming. I can't see the comment section, but I can just imagine how it's burning up right now. But yeah, so that was, it's amazing what you can kind of get into. So, let me just leave it at this with the last minute that we're here. So is, if anybody out there wants to become a lawyer, and I'm going to make the pitch, it's the greatest show on earth, right? You get a backstage pass to some crazy shit, some interesting stuff. If you can have the ability to do it, right? Because you can talk to a lawyer that's doing criminal law, water law, softwood, watch the comments, all sorts of fun stuff. And it's always what could be possibly interest you. But if not, if you don't want to, just hire one of us. We'll take your money. We appreciate that. So I was going to say, you got bills to pay. I got bills. You got this internet connection, this fancy internet connection you're going to have to pay for, right? So
I do. I do, and I'm trying to convince the internet company to make it better, and they just won't. I hate them. I hate them for that. I might need you to sue. I might need you to pro hawk into Minnesota and fight them.
Oh, because I'm sure the phone company is and the power internet company. We don't care because we don't have to.
Right.
So,
okay. Before you go, I've got 3 chats that I really want to hit.
Okay.
Because they're of the larger amounts here. So Facts Not Feeling says, 1, have you heard Tom McDonald's song Snowflakes? I have not. Have you heard of that?
You're talking to an old guy now.
No. Yeah, it's a recent internet thing, but it's in the vein of this sort of cancel culture type stuff that's been going around.
I literally depend on my secretary to tell me what's going on in popular culture. No, I told you, I had to go on the internet about the gun and the purple dildo thing, right? So
right.
I mean, yeah. So anyway.
How'd you explain the purple dildo to your wife in the search history stuff? Like, look, honey, I've got a picture of a giant.
Wife, from the work that I do, my wife is not even just don't even look because it's going to just be horrifying the crap that you're going to find there, right? Don't even try. So.
Yeah, I remember when I had to explain, like, not to my wife, but to some other people, I was like, I'm telling them how to make marijuana resin, like how it works and stuff. And they're like, how in the hell do you know this? I'm like, I had to do a lot of case research. Okay.
There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube if you look, so.
Okay. 2, have you or any of Lucas's family seen the Snowflake video? No on you. Lucas can't watch it. Don't know about his dad. Did you hear teens without a vaccination card had a hashtag written on their hand at Exeter prom? Every 3 dances raised a hand for tracing. Oh, they had a hashtag written on their hand without a vaccination, and they had to raise their hand every 3 dances to make sure. That's insane. We're getting too far.
So here, let me give you this last thought. Is I was told about a school district that said, if you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask at school as a teacher. Yeah. But if you're not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask.
Right.
Okay. What? And by the way, you got to turn over all your vaccination records.
Yeah.
Okay. That school is government, guys. School is government, right?
Yeah, and that's different than the Methodist Hospital down in Houston.
Correct.
Because that's a private entity. And while I don't think they should be able to make employment contingent on vaccination, the law says that they pretty much can. But schools are different. That's a government saying you must be vaccinated.
See, and I can even understand it for a hospital, right? Because you're talking about a medical. I mean, I can even understand that, right? And I could even accept that, right?
Sure.
But employers, you don't. I'm the weirdo. Employers, you don't own your employees, right? You rent your employees. You don't own your employees, right? So, I guess the law doesn't always agree with I don't get to wear the robe, So
right. Mega Mobas says, I live in St. Joe County and people around here make that guy seem pretty tame. I think he's talking about the butt fucker guy.
Yeah.
Says, I've seen a lot of methed up people and just think, Jesus Christ, how did I end up here? And then Atsushi Kano says
he's a Centerville warrior, right? So that's the county seat in St. Joe. So yeah.
Atsushi says, Phil, have you covered cattle land for grazing and Department of Fishery where drainage rivers pass through with their voluntary turns to involuntary rules?
I have not, but I do know of that because I work with, or at least if I work with and follow a couple of pro property groups that do litigation on that. I've not been involved with it, but I am somewhat familiar with it. The problem is just as fast as you can fix one agency's screw up with properties, Bureau of Land Management, Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, Parks Department, county zoning, regional zoning. We have something in Michigan called the Natural Rivers Act. I mean, it never ends, and I laugh because when I first started, when I was going into this particular business, one of my wife's extended family members is a lawyer. He's a medical malpractice attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, do you think there's going to be enough work out there with government screwing up people's lives? And, when I started, I didn't really know. I can say unequivocally, Unequivocally, the answer is absolutely yes. There
There's-
is more than enough work out there because it just never ends. Just as fast as you think they couldn't come up with something new, bang, you find out something new, that it's another way that they're trying to dictate things to people where they probably should just stay the hell home, stay out of it. So
They tried to pass a law in Minnesota years ago that would make any body of water, no matter how temporary, that could hold any navigable watercraft into a wetland, which meant if you had a depression on your land that would on occasion have standing water during heavy rain and a canoe could sit in that water, you now have a government protected wetland and you couldn't even mow it. It's insane. It's insane. The
Yep.
government overreach will never end.
Well, you can mow it after you fill out the forms and get the permit and pay the filing fee and have an inspection, right?
Right.
You're just not very American, you know that? So
You're right. You're right. I need to pay my dues. That's what I need to do.
Get in line and fill out the paperwork, right? So
all right, last chat, and then I will let you back to your wonderful non-internet life. And this is from Uy Uy Uy. He says, simply balls ? So I don't know how to take that.
the answer is yes.
Perfect.
I don't know what is answered yes to, but yes, absolutely.
I think you answered correctly. That's my guess on that. That's how I would have answered the question, if that makes you feel better.
Well, I may have just committed myself to something I might sorely regret, So
no,
we talked at the beginning of this about deliverance, remember? So
we did, but I think your answer is safely correct.
There we go.
All right. Well, Phil, I won't take any more of your time tonight. I really appreciate you coming on.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. So
yeah, we'll have to have you on again. I would love to talk Fourth Amendment issues with you, as they pertain to stuff and even get to some of the other stuff we didn't get to talk about today, which was really like getting into different governments or different state governments and how they've handled lockdowns. But
we got lots of stuff coming down, and I actually got some big court cases coming up at the 6th Circuit here next month that would give us a lot to talk about. So if your fan base will have me back, I'd love to come back. So
I think they definitely will. But the best part is I'm a dictator, so it's me.
Oh, aren't you? There you go. Aren't you just that true-blooded American?
I'm a benevolent dictator.
It's the idea. What the idea that I'm very democratic so long as you vote my way and do what I tell you to do. Right?
Nailed it.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. See, look at all that power goes right to his head. Those earphones are cutting, just spewing that power right into your head that way. So,
every night. Every night.
There you go.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for
No
coming
problem.
on.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And if you guys can keep your eyes out on Lucas's case, because he needs all the support he can get, because he's got, we're hoping we're going to prevail at the Court of Appeals. As you saw, it was a tough panel.
Yeah.
But we need all the support we can have with him, because we're thinking we're probably going to have to go the distance with this, probably to the higher courts, and maybe even further than that. So, but follow up, keep an eye on his story, and keep up to date on that, because that helps us then too. So
we will absolutely do so. And thank you, by the way, for representing him. I'm glad to see he has very competent representation. And it's been nice getting to know you a little bit.
Very good. Very good. Well, I appreciate it. So anyway, good night.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
Later.
Bye. Okay. There's two of me. Just a minute. Oh my God, everything's a disaster. Hold on while I fix. Ooh, it's a Zoom call or a Google Meet call. Just a second. My camera's going to go blank. Or wait. Yeah. There we go. Let's get rid of this. Just a second here, and we will get the regular camera pulled up. Where are we? Are you serious? Wonder Twins powers activate. Oh, baby. There we go. All right. Well, that was awesome. I I like Phil a lot. I think he's great. Very interesting guy. Smart attorney. Glad to see Lucas is in good hands. Adam D says, thanks for this, Nick. Hey, it is my pleasure. It's all fun for me. It's always fun when I get to talk law with someone, and I get to learn things. That's the other things. I get to learn things about the law and about different aspects and the practice of it. Because being a lawyer who comments generally on the law on the internet, not a lot of lawyers do this for one very specific reason. Law is so broad. It's so broad that there's no way to know all of it. So a lot of times, I'm grabbing stuff that I have no idea about, and I'm merely acting as a translator. I'm trying to translate the legalese. I'm trying to grab some case law or whatever, but I'm learning in that process along with you guys and just working as translator. So it's great to have people who are in active practice tackling some of these subjects come on and talk about how their practice works in these different aspects and avenues to the law. So, also, guys, I have to call you a pack of rabid degenerates on your balls, no balls stuff. How dare you? How dare you put this man? This man sat here for well over double the time he had committed to. He answered questions. He was cordial. He was nice. He was based and red-pilled. And then here you go. Here you go. Ooey, ooey, ooey comes in at the last minute. And he's like, by the way, balls. We got this man talking about floppy purple dildos. And you're like, balls? Of course, balls. Of course, balls. And then I see everybody sitting there telling me to ask him. They're like, oh, Nick, are you going to ask the question? I'm like, I don't ever ask the question. You guys always ask the question. Here you are trying to get me to do it. Very unfair. Very unfair to put that on me. I didn't do nothing. Okay. That being said, we do have some other chats to go through. Oh, let me tell you guys a quick story about how mad I am at my dad. I like my dad. My dad's great. Don't tell him, because I want it to kind of be a surprise, but I think Father's Day's in like a month, right? Something like that. What's going on up here? Father's Day's in like a month. And I'm going to hopefully invite my dad to a Father's Day chat on the Locals page as a Locals exclusive. I think it'll be great. I don't know what that'll be. Next week? It's next week? Sunday? Why did I think it was in July? Oh my God. I better ask him quick then. I better ask him quick. Anyway, but I'm mad at him. I'm mad at him. So, I'll tell you why. He messages me today. He knows about the show and he knows about the Twitch show and all that stuff. And he says to me, The Big Lebowski has been added to Amazon Prime. My jaw hits the floor. I'm like, you're joking. This is the best day that there could be. It's not true, though. It's not true, though. The Big Lebowski has been added as an IMDb movie that you can watch with ads. It is not actually on the Amazon Prime that will work for the app. So here, like all dads are supposed to do, this is a job of dads. It's to build you up to the point of conquest and then remind you that you are yet a mere mortal. You are a mortal human, and you do not get to live in perfection. You have to deal with the sadness and crushing disappointment of reality. So I'm very, very upset about this turn of events. Vine the Cold One says you need to watch movies on Discord. That's highly illegal, and as an attorney, I literally cannot do that. I literally cannot do that. First Last says you owe us gaming anyway. Well, yes, but tomorrow, I was like, oh, I'm going to watch Big Lebowski tomorrow. That'll be awesome. No. It is not happening. So with that said, I think we need to go ahead, do some of these chats. Vine the Cold One says it's only illegal if you get caught. It's not the illegality that worries me. It's the ethical issue of I cannot advocate or support the open breaking of the law. It's the ethical issue that is more pressing for me. People watch movies illegally on Discord all the time. They do it all the time, and that they of course are not getting sued by the movie studios. That'd be silly, right? For movie studios to do this, they'd be spending a lot of money and going after a very small amount of money in return. That's not the issue for me. For me, it's the ethical issue. If I am in open violation of U.S. copyright laws, it's much less likely that I would get sued for the copyright and much more likely that I would actually get hit with a real legitimate ethical violation on it. So, can't do it. Can't do it. That being said, let's read these chats that are for the rest of the night here, and then we can wrap up the show, and we can, I suppose, do some gaming over on Twitch, I guess. I was thinking about not doing gaming tonight on Twitch just to piss off the game crew. I'm like, I'm kind of tired, because I am really tired. And I'm sleeping really late lately. But we will do some gaming and play some games. Tomorrow is a movie night. So anyway, next, let's do these chats, and then we'll figure all that out. Oh, by the way, let me tease this. It's highly possible that I will have a show about a week from today, maybe sometime next week, that will blow your mind. It will blow your mind if it comes together. This is the E3 cinematic teaser trailer reveal. You don't get anything more than that. Just know that in about a week, I'm working on something, and none of you see it coming, and nobody will expect it. And if it comes through, it's going to be a huge show. If it comes through, you'll know about it really, really soon. Much bigger show than James O'Keefe. If it comes through, you'll know about it really, really soon. And it's one of those shows that I will schedule out. I will let people know when it is, because the word will need to get out. And it'll be good times. Good times. And if it falls through, I'll tell you. Okay. Here we go. Oh, by the way, woo, police, it's now my half birthday. So there you go. It's my half birthday today. Officially, now that midnight has come, and now I'm the most important person in the world because it's my half birthday. I have 6 months left until I'm 40, which basically means my kids take my keys and I go into the fucking retirement home because 40 is dead. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? The Dragon's Treasure says, when I hear lawyers talk of the law, in theory, it all sounds nice and cute, but when the chips are down in an important case like Lucas's appeal, all I feel is unyielding rage at the practice. What the hell should anyone have faith in this system anymore? It's important to remember that Lucas's appeal is not an appeal of Lucas's ultimate justice. That is not out there. There are several steps before that. This would be the easy victory, the path to uncharging Lucas. And while I think it should happen, that is an uphill climb. So we'll see how it turns out. I have a lot of faith that Lucas will ultimately be vindicated. I just hope that he's not too damaged on the way. This explains something. I've never spoken to Lucas. I've never spoken to him at all. I would love to talk to him. I can't imagine what his life is like. But I've spoken with his dad, but I've never spoken to him. And I was always like, wonder why I don't get to talk to Lucas. Now it makes sense. He can't use phones. He can't use the internet. He can't do any of that stuff. So I actually am prevented by government from talking to him over this thing. I would have to do it in person or something like that. And I had no idea. I had no idea that was one of his release conditions. I never even really thought about it because that puts a whole new spin on how horrifying his lockdown of 18 months is. 18 months, no internet, no phone, no messaging apps. Today, this is 1985. It's crazy. Arizona AG says, pardon me, I'm just coming through. It's just hard to walk around while carrying such an enormous dick and balls. Yeah, the Arizona Attorney General is hilarious right now. He basically told Merrick Garland to sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up. Sit down and shut up. You're not messing with our audit. I did 2 videos today. The audit one was okay reception. The other one, man, nobody's watching my Florida Ron DeSantis video. Nobody. It's crazy town. They do not. It is not getting any play. And so it's a mess. But that's okay. That's okay. The Ron DeSantis signed a bill today. I'm going to tell you guys because I know most of you watched it, but some of you didn't. Ron DeSantis signed a bill today for a moment of silence at the beginning of each school day. And the shrieking rage that occurs at the idea that some kid might pray. Some kid might pray during their moment of silence it's amazing. It's delicious. It's delicious how pissed off people are about this. Even people who watch this show are mad about it. They're like, leave your faith at the door or whatever. It's like, how do you divorce yourself from your core beliefs? Why should they have to? It's amazing. I think Ron DeSantis is hilarious right now. How long is this moment? 1 to 2 minutes. No shorter than 60 seconds, no longer than 2 minutes. That's it. is great. I think it's very, very funny. And then you got people talking about like libertarian principles of government dictating children's time in the context of public school, which is the funniest fucking contradiction on earth. Like you're like, wow, the government can't tell kids to spend 2 minutes in silence. You're in a government school for 9 hours. It's 9 hours of government diktat. And you're like, 2 minutes of silence? Well, that violates my freedom principles. No, it doesn't. What the fuck are you talking about, you dummy? Oh my God. And someone says libertarianism is cringe. Let me just suggest that anybody who says that the government allowing 2 minutes of time for children to decide anything they want to do, any thought they want to have for 2 straight minutes of non-government indoctrination, anybody who says that that is anti-libertarian is fucking stupid. That's stupid. Literally stupid. You've got 8 hours of the government telling children literally what to think, and 2 minutes where they don't, and you say that the 2 minutes is the problem? That's dumb right there. Oh my gosh. That is the weirdest position I've ever seen. Someone's like trying to call me out on my libertarian principles, and I'm like, I want the government to give kids 8 hours of silence. I want to give them 8 hours of freedom to express to explore their thoughts. That's what I want. I don't want a government school at all. But if you're going to shove kids in there, give them a couple minutes of self-reflection. You can sit there and think about your big titty goth girlfriend. Whatever you want. Literally anything. Somebody came in. They hadn't watched the full video yet, so that was fun. But they hadn't watched the full video yet. They said, "Oh, well, can I pray to Hillary Clinton?" Yeah, you can. You can worship Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Hillary Clinton. You can ponder the glories of abortion. You can do whatever you want. You can sit there and think about how great critical race theory is. You can worship Yaqub. You can do anything. It's 2 minutes of full, free, unbridled, free thought in a public school. Dr. OPM says, rip Dakota Sky. Wait, what happened to Dakota Sky? It's very concerning. NW Backcountry says, I'm an atheist and I think a moment of silence is a great idea. Of course. Of course. And the best part is, under the law, the teacher cannot direct the moment of silence. She was homeless and found dead? That's a shame. She had such a promise. Why didn't she open an OnlyFans? She could have made infinite money and not died from drug overdoses. It's too bad. Too bad. No, she wasn't homeless. Well, whatever. So she's dead now. She's dead now. Listen, I thought she was going to die from perforations or prolapse or something like that. I figured that's how she would die. But OD is such a boring, that's a boring thing. No, Eldon, I'm not going to do it on this video. Not on this video. Okay. Back to this. Let's see. Bad Emonite says, I'll have you know that I personally identify as a creature of the night And you saying good morning so loosely like that invalidates my identity and deeply offends me. Sob. Too bad. Get killed. LaPierre Hammer for Prison says on judges who already made up their minds. U.S. v. Miller was held before 2 judges, one a Klansman, who literally voted for the law in question and didn't allow the defendant his choice of plea or attorney. A literal show trial, still precedent somehow. Yes, U.S. v. Miller is a terrible, terrible decision. Someday I need to do a deep dive on it, but look, I have a lot of videos or a lot of subjects to do really deep dives on from a business perspective. Let me just say this from a business perspective. It's hard to motivate yourself to dump dozens of hours into something that will likely not get any reaction at all. It's hard to motivate yourself to do that. I still want to. I want to do U.S. v. Miller. I've been meaning to do a series on Chauvin's memorandum, which I've got. The problem with Chauvin's memorandum is not actually the business decision. It's literally, I have not had time to put this together because I want to have it done before his hearing, which is coming up. But yeah, it's hard to justify some of those things. Let's see. He says, the only time I'll do a 6 feet social distancing is when I'm 6 feet under. Malik Foxon says, to Phil, I hear you on the issues with the internet. It kills me when we have service interruptions. I work on the business side of things for context, and it's tough to tell a business their internet's not going to be back before peak hours because of tech failures. Next, Dread Clown says, we lost power for the night, so I looked at my roommate and gave him the choice to deal with no power like the Amish or the God-fearing New England Patriots before us. Buttfucker 3000 says in Trump voice, Phil, are you familiar with Judge Jeffrey Middleton? Have you watched viral videos? Viral videos, a new thing, a thing that I never even heard of, but viral. It's apparently going around, transmission from one to another, some sort of viral thing. Viral videos. Also, heard about Michigan Supreme Court trying to suppress his court live streams. Who's the worst, Kamala Harris, Kim Gardner, or that nasty, awful Gretchen Whitmer? Awful, awful human. Terrible. Crypto says in Trump voice, those pipeline hackers are dumb as they kept the crypto in Bitcoin. If they were smart, they would have converted the Bitcoin into Monero at foreign non-KYC exchange and then stored it on the hardware wallet. But what if they forget the passwords? All right. William Palmieri. Oh, wait, no. First one. Nix Hex says, I'm a third of the way through The Sparrow. The crew is preparing for the mission. I love the characters, the plot, and the science. Thanks for the recommendation. The Sparrow's a great book. Great book. Very, very good. And it even gets a lot better. I liked it. I enjoyed it cover to cover. Richard Grubber says, stop shitting on my good vibes, lawman. We are going to win. I'm not shitting on anybody's vibes. I only shit in toilets. Not even in the streets. Poop Notch says, stop being an alt-right shill. I'm a bad alt-righter. I don't know what you mean. Stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. Okay. Stop grifting for the people I don't like. Look, I'm an equal opportunity grifter. I'll take anybody's money and everybody's money. William Palmieri says, Phil's right here. Phil's right. Here in Australia, we have anti-terror units dragging college journalists from their houses and charging them with internet bullying. Zypher Warrior, on Twitch, it will be game night tonight. Not Applicable says, thanks for everything you're doing, Phil. Means a lot. Tony Goza says, once you start censoring, it does not stop until everyone is censored. Bad Vibe says, Courtney Love, I want lying journalist's head. I don't think it's a threat. What journalist? Who is it? Oh, I better finish this drink. You guys are almost at 1,000 likes. Then I have to do a second drink if I finish this one first. Almost at 1,000 likes. We'll see. Not applicable says she was a bitch, so. Stony Mick says rackets and friend thoughts on the Fair Unemployment Tax Act and its reserves should have two receptacles to draw from or not. Listen, you subversive motherfucker. I saw you. I saw this chat. That was a good and proper guess. Why do you try to corrupt this poor man? Talking about purple dildos. Can you imagine? Some of you are cool. Don't come to school tomorrow. Flop, 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 flop. NQS says 13 years ago today, Father's Day 2008, my father Tony died. 1938 to 2008. Conceived in Quebec. First generation United States and Massachusetts. U.S. Navy. Baker. Died in SLC. Raise a glass. This is a combined glass for the 1,000 likes and for your father, NQS. I'm sure this is a hard time of year for you. I don't think you ever get over the loss of a father. Right? You know, that's I have very few fears in this world. Loss of a child, loss of a spouse, loss of a parent. Those in that order, I think. And the reason child outdoes spouse, before I get chewed up by the chat or by the spouse, is because enduring it with the spouse is helpful, but also you have to see this. You have to share the spouse's pain with that. You have to share in their suffering along with you with the child. That's tough. But we see the loss of a father particularly, right? Like you see the single mother homes, you see this, you know, the crime stats. It's not articulated in that way. But the loss of a father, I don't think you ever really get over it. Speaking of the loss of not a child, not a spouse, and not a father. The other day, many of you heard that Lion, our cat Lion, was allegedly hit by a car and had passed away. We found out tonight that that is not true. Lion returned, which is baffling. Absolutely baffling. Lion is alive and well. He's back in our house. It has been 2 weeks that Lion was gone. And he is now back. So it was crazy. We've been kind of avoiding the issue with the kids. You know, you don't want to tell your kids that their cat died. We've been through dead cats. It's awful. I fucking hate pets because they die and you have to bury them and the kids want to have a funeral and like everybody's crying and you're like, oh my God, all I want in the world is for this to end. And then I have to I have to dig the grave and bury him, which is a pain. But Lion's back. So maybe I can find him before the Twitch show. Victor Phantasm says, hey, Nick, it's a miracle. Another Pride Month Immaculate Conception. Behold, Patton Oswalt and Mr. Incredible have blessed us with this stream guest. Stop it. Jared says, as a Michigander, Gretchen Bitchmer deserves life in prison. I agree. Ariel Fetter says, the point of the Constitution isn't to safeguard your body, but your rights. Oh yes, guys, there's a guy in the chat, gay and still at large. I should say a guy who was in the chat. Gay and still at large was in the chat and has died unexpectedly. You guys might recognize him. I do have his GoFundMe pulled up. Is Mark Aguirre apparently was gay and still at large. Was the name. He has died. So F's in chat for him. He was called home to God on 6/14/21 of an unexpected disease that took him at the young age of 25. Please keep him, the Aguirre, Cruz, and Yepez families in your prayers. Additionally, if you find it in your hearts to help with the unexpected hospital, medical, doctor, and funeral bills, please donate whatever you can to alleviate these expenses. I'll put this in the chat. They're at 6145 raised so far. Here's the link. I'm spamming it in the chat. Oh fuck. I'm going to make a donation. Gay and still large is an active participant in the chat. I'm going to donate $100 right now. Look, if anybody wants to donate, I don't ask people to do this stuff. If you want to do this, you're certainly welcome to. He was a member of the community. It's always sad to see someone lose their life. Oh, fuck me. Can I get... Thank you. Let's do this. I'm donating right now. While I'm thinking about it. So anyway, I dropped my donation in there. It's not showing up yet, apparently. That's good. But yeah, he was a member of this community, and it's a weird thing of doing this on the internet, right? Is that you reach so many people, and it's not that much. It's not that many people in the long run. But you reach it doesn't. Let me rephrase that. It doesn't seem like that much because it's just a few thousand people here or there, but it is that much, and you get people who do die, and have real tragedies occur. So, oh, there we go. I've made my donation $100. Anybody else who wants to contribute can go ahead and contribute. This family is obviously suffering an unexpected loss, and member of this community and all that stuff. So it's a weird thing to see. This is not the first person from the chat who has died. And it will not be the last person. But that's how it goes. So sorry, I don't mean to bring it down, but the families, believe me, for the family, it's probably more depressing than for any of us. Did he prefer balls or no balls on his futas? You know what? The best part is, Rich Mendelson, in heaven, you get simultaneously balls and no balls on your futas. So since he has died, he is now gone to the afterlife where you get both. You get both and neither. His username was gay and still at large. I remember him from the chat very much. He was an active participant, sent several super chats, as well as contributed quite a bit to the actual, the regular chat as well. Buttfucker 3000 says just entered Phil's chat. Pajama Man. Here we go. We get this serious moment of a viewer dying. Of a viewer dying unexpectedly at the ripe age of 25. Oh my God, so much life left. And then we're like, Buttfucker 3000 says just entered Phil's chat. Pajama Man says, would you recommend tuxedo body paint for a Zoom court meeting? Yes, 100%. Every time. Joel Reese says, more horror stories from the law. This is great. Victor Phantasm says, wait, Nick, this guy is a real estate lawyer in Michigan. I should have talked to him long ago. My grandpa owned Swartz Creek outside of Flint. He hired Jewish lawyers, and they said no bones on reclaiming it. There might not have been any bones on reclaiming it. Property law gets messy. Eldon Bainling says, based Phil, balls or no balls on your Fuda. Tom Bombethrill says, masterfully done on the balls question, Nick. Look, he's the one who answered correctly. Eldon Bainling says, Nick's dad is team no balls. Facts, get wrecked, Nick. Diamond Duck 98 says, nothing. However, I, Nick Rackets, as a man of my word, apologize for taking 18 months to have Kendra back on. Habita Hubita says, Nick, what makes you so amazing? Well, it's this stunning proboscis that I paid extra for. I used to have a little pathetic, little tiny 1-inch goyim nose, one little 1-inch Gentile nose, and I have paid through blood, sweat, and law school for this massive proboscis just for you. Victor Phantasm says, imagine being Nick, turning 40 in 6 months, has the best life with kids, awesome wife and a house. Now be me, 32, assets to the moon, no girlfriends, no kids, and worried, but has a house. Guess I'll just be sad. Don't be sad. At 32, man, at 32, I was, what? Unemployed, in law school, in debt, out of my mind in debt. I did have a wife and kids, but no assets to appreciate. I had a house, wondering how I was going to pay for it, wondering how I was going to pay my internet bill, my cable bill, my phone bills, wondering how I was going to pay for gas for law school. I went to law school 2 hours away. All those things. 7 short years later, my life is completely different. And 7 years from now, my life will likely be very different again. Persona non grata says, hey, Nick, great show tonight. As always, here's to peace and love to you, your family, and your futa with balls. Big balls. Thank you, Persona non grata. Hungry Ewok says, have you not seen Pet Sematary? Oh, I've seen it. John Cook says, I should mention my uncle woke up after about 5 months coma. Has recovered a lot of speech and mobility. Thanks for everyone who contributed to the GoFundMe. Whoa! 5 months in a coma, he woke up? That's amazing. Glad to hear it. Hey, Aaron, thank you for the donation. Umbrella Core Security says, would you sign a bag of ketchup chips for me? Yeah? Mars Altar says, now we know the name of the basic bee who started the Lucas situation. The internet can encourage her till she and heroes. 1, please don't do that. 2, we've already talked about who it was. We've talked about it. Phil didn't go into it. The basic bitch who started the Lucas GoFundMe has been targeting Lucas under the cancellation #MeToo harassment for 2 years prior to this, because Lucas had the very unpopular opinion that women in law enforcement should be subjected to the same tests for physical ability as men, and that would likely weed out a lot of the women. It was voiced in an assigned discussion about women in law enforcement in a course. He gave that opinion. He gave that opinion, and because of that opinion, he was hounded for 2 years, canceled from everything he was involved in and did, and then charged with a crime. Satanic Potato says, I can't believe he's gone. I remember his chats. He was funny and real smart. Now I'm just sad. This is terrible. Fighting Slug says, if anyone thinks that Nick was joking about the small nose, there's a picture of him cosplaying Drex. That was before he worked for a bank/law school. It was actually, I'd already worked for a bank at that point, but very funny. Let's see. Kool-Aid Man says, oh yeah, Nick, I'm ice cubes deep into a mommy I met in Branson, Missouri, so I'm railing her, snorting meth off her back and having a jolly old time when a kid wakes up. So now I'm in the awkward position of trying to finish while he asks mom for some juice. That's when you pour some out of yourself. Just tip over, let a little of that juice spill into a cup, tell the kid to get lost and go watch some Powerpuff Girls or whatever. Bad Emanite says, you know what, your bigotry has gone too far. Don't come to school tomorrow, Nikki. I'd hate to see something bad happen to you on your 40th half birthday. Bad Dragonite says, I've got a purple dildo with your name on it, bucko. And Umbrella Corps Security says, Nick, would you sign my mom? Yes. Absolutely. I don't discriminate on signings. I'll sign moms. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out tonight. Good time. Good times were had by all. I enjoyed having Phil on. I enjoyed having you guys in the chat, as I always do. Make sure to come over to Twitch. We will be playing some video game. I haven't figured out what game to play yet. I have a new one that's kind of fun, and I should start an old one, or I should play Dragon's Dogma. I don't know. I don't know yet. Uy 99 says peace. Peace, and I will say it also. Guys, have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. Peace.
Oh, he drinks a fair bit, but you realize that it just helps get his noggin jogging along. With his glass by his side and his kids asleep tight, we'll hear some law-splaining tonight. With his microphone muted, we'll laugh at this boomer until he explains it's all part of the plan. Watch his face become redder as he becomes meta, raging at idiots from Twitterland. From the white shores of Maine to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the law better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we have now. Oh, his lady is fair, and she handles herself with the grace of one who has borne many children. As the wife of a lawman, she makes sure that he has the time and the place to provide for them there. So pour out an ardbeg, a bow, more a love rug. The spirits flow as the ones who get unemployed. So pour out a glass for the tea post on Twitter as we hear law-splaining tonight. From the white shores of Nan to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the law better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we are now. Oh, the guests are all planet folks from Doug T to Drexel. They bring their perspective and spice to the mix. But the reason we're here and the one that we cheer is the one who is showcasing us his career. get unemployed. So pour out a glass for the tea, post on Twitter as we hear Lost Planing tonight. From the wide shores of Nairn to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the thought better than